When did a bro stop a party by trashing the place? Partying at an old fraternity house in college, and in the basement there was a lone PVC water pipe that stretched from floor to ceiling. This room also happened to be the location of the heaviest beer pong table known to man. Late in the night, after copious beers had been consumed, some wise guy decided that the beer pong table needed to be relocated. He proceeds to push the adamantium table up against the wall with some force, effectively shattering the PVC pipe. This is in the middle of winter, so ice-cold water starts spraying in a 6-foot radius out of the pipe, dousing nearly everyone in the room. Girls are crying about their hair and clothes, and the guys are yelling at each other about finding the shutoff valve, which took about 5 drunk minutes to locate. Meanwhile, I'm standing bone dry on the opposite side of the room, drinking a natural light, don't judge me, it was a college, and watching an impromptu wet t-shirt contest. It was a good night. I saw a guy snort a whole Xanax and then throw a pool stick through a flat-screen TV. I don't know if that counts. Oh, don't worry, it does. Well, the Xanax didn't work, I guess. A friend of mine threw a party at his house a few years back. The house was split up into apartments, the first floor being one apartment and the second floor being another. Both floors had a deck out back, one right above the other. I was out in the backyard smoking a cig and talking to someone. I look over to see a few people drinking immediately behind the first floor deck. I happen to look up at the second floor deck to see someone walk out. He proceeds to then whip out his equipment and wee-wee off the back of the deck onto the group of people below. I was at a house party where the token hated roommate immediately got smashed and was stumbling around. He goes into the bathroom for about 30 minutes and then comes out giggling like a madman. He loudly declared that he left an upper decker in his own bathroom. Boy, were his roomies mad, and he thought it was the funniest thing on earth. He didn't find it so funny the next morning when they all but forced him to clean it up the moment he was awake. My God, my money definitely wasn't on someone's party foul being against their own living place. Also, I absolutely hate that upper decker is a common enough thing to become a recognized term. If you don't know what it means, feel free to Google, but for goodness sake, don't use image search. I know a guy that wiped his butt with a nice white face towel in my friend's washroom because he was too lazy to look for TP in the drawers beneath the sink. Also been to several parties where people got mashed and just tore the fricking house up, stealing and breaking stuff for the hell of it. That, to me, is the ultimate party foul. If someone is kind and gracious enough to offer you a roof to get drunk under, snacks, seating, and company, you better damn well leave the place in a relatively good condition. I was at a party in an apartment complex. I stepped out to the backyard for a smoke when I had a powerful urge to go number 1. I was already hammered at this point and didn't give an F. I only had one shoe on, for instance, and I found a nice remote corner in which to relieve myself. Now I'm done. I suddenly hear the door to the backyard smash open and hear, "What the frick are you doing?" I zip up and turn around to find the super. Now, this super was already a legend for being a jerk, but that night he was getting ready to hit the town. And being the middle-aged Romanian he is, he had a 70s tuxedo-style shirt on with the buttons down to his chest. He had his hair slicked back and was sporting a huge gold chain, Miami Vice style. I freeze. Think. Just think. I stammer, "No English." "What did you say?" No English. Me no English." I'm Asian, and I'm saying this in my most broken Chinese accent imitation, helped on by untold shots of Jameson. "Where are you from?" "China," says I. "No, you frick. What apartment?" Now my English breaks down utterly, and I'm still just gesturing and pointing and saying stuff like, "My friend, his place. Up there." After 5 minutes of this, he glares at me and kicks my butt out of the apartment complex, which is fine except I'm wearing one shoe, don't have my keys, wallet, or phone. I see the super lock the front door and the backyard door. I have no way to contact my friends at this point, so I walk across to the neighborhood bar. The bartender kinda recognizes me. I explain my situation and he just shakes his head and gives me a pint of beer. He lets me use my phone to call my friends, but they're already too hammered to pick up. So I spend the night standing across the street from the apartment building, hiding in the shadows of a tree so that the super doesn't spot me, and waiting for anyone to enter the building so I can sneak in behind him. Later on, my friend tells me the super went around asking everyone if they knew who the whizzing Chinaman was. In short, booze turned me into a one-shoed illegal immigrant. A friend of mine was going wee-wee off the back deck of a cabin into the woods when a girl was stumbling back from said woods. I was standing about 100 feet away and I saw a glorious yellow arc strike this girl on the face and shoulders. She just walked right back to the bonfire like nothing had happened. She may have assumed it was rain because she was really hammered. I told her what happened shortly after so she could clean off that smell. In grad school, a few friends moved into a house together in their second year. The house was a death trap waiting to happen, but that's another story. They threw a party a few weeks after getting their keys, and for some unknown reason, a group of 10 to 12 freshmen had caught wind of the party and just showed up to get hammered. I arrived late to the party with some friends and immediately noticed two things. A, it is a complete sausage fest. All of the freshmen that arrived are male, and B, the faint but very distinct smell of number 2 invaded my nostrils as soon as I opened the door. Not dog do or cat scat, human turd. I guess that's the curse of having a very sensitive nose. I seek out one of the hosts, Will, and he gathers his roommates to make sure no one has clogged a toilet or upper-decked them. All of the bathrooms are clear, yet the smell remains and it's growing stronger. My friend Alice, one of the very few women, figures out that the smell is coming from one of the freshers in the living room that's drunk and dancing with a huge load of crap sloshing around in his undies. Not just a little, a huge saggy bulge that's clearly visible through the kid's khaki slacks. The smell in that room was overwhelming, but somehow none of the freshmen seemed to notice or care. We all just stared at him slack-jawed for a minute before Alice walks up to him and tells him that he may have had an accident. He flips out and bolts out the door, leaving little splotches of brown every time his foot hits the floor. It had run down his pants leg and was just beginning to drip off the cuff when we caught it. I left, they clean up, and kicked out all of the rest of the freshmen. The urinals in my fraternity specifically say flush up, because if you flush down, they flood. And if you flush down and then decide to kick the handle back up to rectify your mistake, there's a biblical torrent spraying in all directions. Many parties have been fouled by this arrangement. A friend of mine hooked up with a guy and then told him she loved him, at which point he avoided her at all costs. The next weekend, she showed up at a party in his dorm, crawled into his roommate's bed, and cried and vomited for 3 hours. Getting her home was a blast. Was at a party once with a friend who had to go number 2. However, the girl that had lived there was occupying the sole bathroom and refused to hurry up. My friend proceeded to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and left a fecal present in the vegetable crisper. You know, the narrator swears that he's been trying to spread out the stories involving bodily emissions like this. However, there seem to be a great deal of them. So please bear with me and understand that I'm cutting out the many gagging noises while I edit this. As some of you know, if you pop the top off a beer bottle with the bottom of yours, all of the beverage comes out. So, is not the correct assumption that you have to drink it all. This one girl goes up to my friend with the right idea and pops the top off of his beer bottle. But I guess she was a little too inebriated and just shatters the entire bottle in my friend's hands. My friend, who is now bleeding, looks up and says, "Oh, my hand's bleeding. Someone get me another beer." My friend did a heroic job of finding a trash can to chuck up in last New Year's. Unfortunately, it was a mesh trash can. A friend was getting angry with the guy who was throwing the party, so when everything calmed down and most people were gone or asleep, he got the butter. He microwaved the butter, then poured the melted butter into a bowl. Then he crapped in the butter carton. Then he poured in the melted butter and let it set in the fridge. Then he left. Maybe the butter didn't look right after, but I don't know because we left. And yes, he got the idea from urban legend. There was this guy on my swim team in college. Super nice guy, but terrible with women. He used to be really shy about changing in front of the rest of the guys in the locker room and would always change under a towel while the majority of the rest of us wouldn't bother. Then one day the towel drops and we all see that he has a huge member. At first, we were all flabbergasted that this quiet, semi-awkward, prototypical nice guy was so well endowed. No one could keep it to themselves, and pretty soon all of the girls on the team knew about his big secret. At the next big swim team party, after a night of drunken teasing and congratulations, I think he felt emboldened, so in an attempt to distract the other team's opening shot at Beirut, or beer pong, he whips out his equipment and starts spinning it around helicopter style. His spinning member accidentally knocks over all 6 of his team's cups, and they instantly lost. I was having some friends over for dinner, and one of them began to eat his salad with his entree fork. The rest of the party was absolutely horrified. I nearly dropped my monocle. I was at a party in high school at my loaded friend's house. She had a hot tub which a few of us noticed was being seriously underutilized. My friend's widely despised redneck girlfriend got in first, and after I got a fresh beer, I stripped down to my boxers and made my way across the enormous back deck to the flush-set hot tub. As I stepped in, my foot slipped on the smooth fiberglass seat and to the side, right between the redneck girl's legs. I actually felt my big toe penetrate her as I fell into the water. I managed to keep my beer level and above water. As soon as I got my head back above water, she screamed, "My cooter!" I couldn't stop laughing for a very long time, and I still yell that sometimes when I see that friend. I think I redeemed my drunken clumsiness by A, saving my fresh beer, and B, by eliciting such a ridiculous reaction. In short, I slipped into a hot tub, fell in said tub, kicked my friend's girlfriend in the hoo-ha, who screamed, "My cooter!" managed to hold on to my full beer. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Watched a girl blow chunks mid-beer pong throw all over the table and then scream, "Chuck and rally!" We all cheered. She was one of the last ones up. At a bar in Liverpool in the UK, I was talking to my girlfriend at the foot of some stairs. Suddenly, a guy fell forward between the stairs right down between us, rolled onto his feet, and walked away without missing a fricking beat. The best part was he was wearing a fur coat, sunglasses, and a hat, carrying a drink, and had a cigarette in his mouth. As he walked away, his drink was unspilt, and his cigarette remained firmly in his mouth. His hat and glasses were similarly undisturbed. Must have been some kind of party ninja pimp. Beat a bunch of jerk dudes at beer pong with a hot girl as my partner. Proceeded to lift her up, with her straddling my waist, and gyrated, quite suggestively, in triumph over the table. I was quite drunk, so I dropped her, and the cups of beer on the tabletop went flying. My friend, when hammered, has a teensy bit of a throwing up problem. He was angry and paranoid one night and started using his geyserous discharges as a projectile to ward off people chasing him from behind. The same night, I was helping him relieve himself of his own chunks in the carpeted hallway of my dorm. A young gentleman shook his head as he passed by, saying, "That's just sick," and continued on to relieve his bladder in the trash can opposite of us. I like my school. I got this. This happened to me. This is a true story. I was having a small party at my apartment, about 20 or so people. Everyone's having a good time, beer pong, Halo, Peter Tosh. Throughout the night, I got pretty flirty with one of the ladies and took her into my room. Son, I was drilling it. The thing is, though, unlike many Americans, I haven't had the snippy operation on my eggplant, and my outer skin tore. Something called the frenulum of prepuce is actually what tore, to be more specific. There was blood everywhere. I ran into the living room, undressed as the day I was born, holding my bloody rooster and screaming for everyone to call 911 because I broke my Johnson. A few of my friends and the girl stayed with me until the ambulance arrived, good friends, and the rest left. The girl was so embarrassed and crying. I remember holding my ruptured eggplant, putting pressure on it, trying to comfort her and tell her it wasn't her fault. Crazy fricking night. I'm a frickin' legend these days. My roommate called my mum and told her I was in the ER, so she showed up concerned. Laughing, the nurse who cleaned the wound was gorgeous and just kept repeating, "I'm so sorry." She later added me on Facebook because apparently I'm a charming mother fricker on Norco. The doctor stitching me up felt it necessary to describe in detail how these kinds of injuries don't usually bleed as much as mine. This is my best and worst put together. My friend had an old Prince Albert scar that he shot bottle rockets out of when he got drunk. One party he was in my kitchen and shot a bottle rocket out of his junk, and it flew right through the living room. It hit my other friend right in the forehead and exploded just as he opened the front door to enter the party. He got a cut on his forehead and was freaked out and angry until we explained, and then he almost died laughing. We sure were young and dumb. In short, my friend shot a bottle rocket out of his Johnson and accidentally hit my other friend in the face with it. To clarify, until Googling just now, the narrator thought that a bottle rocket was a small firework of some sort, and this story had a completely different tone when you think it's a guy blasting pyrotechnics out of his junk, and imagining the scarring that he was causing. This is still a wild story anyway, but it feels tamer now that I know a bottle rocket is powered by compressed air and not gunpowder. Someone stole my only bottle of 2009 Dogfish Head 120-minute IPA from my cooler. This is a highly limited, yearly release beer that costs $10 to $15 for one little bottle, and I was saving it for that night, my birthday. Apparently they didn't like it because the next morning I found it open, but full on the bathroom counter. I was at a party with a girl who I was very interested in, and she was very interested in me. Even though we weren't on a date, we were together, telepathically and ocularly screwing the entire night. The night started with tequila, salt, and lime, a Mexican's wet dream. However, given our underage stomachs, our light statures, and our intolerance to booze, we were prone to disaster. And that's exactly what happened. After about 5 or 6 tequila shots, Alberta and I were feeling rather randy. Excited and youthful, imminent flirting occurred, and I wanted to impress this girl by bringing us more drinks. You know, to show her how manly I am, because I can consume an excess amount of alcohol. We were drinking Rolling Rock bottles in the basement, gathered around a table filled with empty bottles, and recklessly throwing these beers back trying to impress one another. After about 3 or 4, we were indubitably hammered. What happened next will never leave my mind for the rest of my life. Alberta turned ashen, and then like a chameleon, camouflaging itself in a tree, her skin transformed into a green color. She sprayed a fountain of projectile chuck all over myself, the table, and herself in a matter of about 2 seconds. I still remember the taste and smell of her lunch because it sprayed on my face, presumably corned beef on rye. To make matters worse, because she was hammered and embarrassed, she stumbled onto the table, causing an eruption of glass to shatter amidst the ground. Subsequently, she fell into the pile of broken glass, cutting herself worse than a knife-hungry, angsty emo listening to Hawthorne Heights. So now she was covered in blood and spew, and I was standing there sporting her lunch, without the slightest clue of what to do next. Everyone's eyes were on her. Little did I know, Alberta is one of those girls that's extremely sensitive to blood, and even mentioning the word makes her queasy. It didn't help that she had the freaking Seine River of red running down her leg either. Amidst all of this commotion, she fainted on the ground and started to tremble. That's when the worst part happened. She dispersed a freaking chocolate mudslide out of her butt, and it dripped down her legs and onto the ground like a fondue fountain. So, here's this girl covered in spew, bleeding like a fiend, and crapping herself all over the floor of my buddy's house. I helped her up, grabbed her some paper towels and a water, and made sure she was conscious and going to survive. And I dipped the scene faster than Colton Harris Moore evaded the FBI. 3 years have passed, and I haven't seen or heard from her since. Sister came home from a hard night of partying and apparently had taken 4 consecutive shots of Wild Turkey 101 as she was leaving. Minutes later, my brother came bounding out of her bedroom saying, "You've got to see this, dude." We go into her bathroom to find her passed out in the fetal position, 1 foot from the loo, with her skirt, but not panties, pulled halfway down her knees, and a large, firm turd halfway protruding from her undies, resting gently on the inside of her thigh. We then called her boyfriend to come clean up Mrs. Turd Lady. He comes over, cleans her up and puts her to bed, at which point she begins to chuck up all over herself and her white sheets, creating a pink, chunky river leading to the edge of her bed, resulting in a smelly, putrid waterfall. I put a bucket under the waterfall and go to sleep. At a party when I was about 19 with my girlfriend. She got a call from her friend who was on a date and needed to be picked up. I was sober, so my girlfriend and I went to go get her. The friend was hammered and got in the back seat. She started crying about how the guy dumped her after she gave him a down-under kiss and even swallowed. She kept burping and saying, "Oh God, I could still taste him." We drove to the girlfriend's place and her friend rinsed her mouth out with scope and chewed a half-pack of gum. Then the three of us went back to the original party. After a couple of hours, the guy who dumped her shows up at the party. The friend starts drinking even more. After about an hour of this, she goes up to him to try and talk things out. She opens her mouth to speak and she hurls all over him. She was taller than him, so she got his face and chest. My girlfriend yells across the room, "Holy crap, she just snowballed him!" The room got quiet. The guy loses it. He smacked the friend so hard she flew backwards and bounced off the wall. And then he started to kick the wall, and he threw a lamp into the TV and hurled the stereo through the window. All the while, the girls are saying, "Somebody stop him!" But unfortunately, we'd all been told privately that the friend had gone south of the border on him, and we all knew that along with the chunks on him, he had his own baby batter all over his shirt, so we weren't going to touch him. After a couple of minutes, he just left. He got arrested a few hours later at his house, did some restitution and community service, and had the name Chucky Snowball until he went to college. In short, girl goes south of the border on a guy and swallows, and then he dumps her. They met at a party later, she chucks his own splooge back up on him, and he goes berserk, earning a new nickname and criminal record. My friend and I rented a hotel suite to have a New Year's Eve party. We were all set to have an awesome night with about 15 people coming over. One of our friends, we'll call him John Doe to protect the guilty, called the front desk at 8 p.m. and asked them to give a message to us indicating he wouldn't be able to make it to the party. So the hotel manager calls and says the following in broken English. "Are you ready to party? John Doe can't make it to party. No party allowed in room." We had to cancel and sat in the room in disbelief at how our friend just ruined our party by trying to be thoughtful. Have you ever heard of a flaming Dr. Pepper? You pour a shot with amaretto and Everclear, light it on fire, drop it in a Coors Light, and down the whole thing at once. It does taste like Dr. Pepper and is a great way to get smashed. Anyway, I saw a guy spill the shot after he lit it on the tile floor of the kitchen. The frickin' tile floor was on fire, that and he spilled booze. Double party foul. What was the most embarrassing public tantrum you've seen a grown adult throw? My first job in high school, working at an ice cream parlor. We had 3 sizes, 2 scoops, 1 scoop, and child size. Why it wasn't just large, medium, and small? Don't ask me. One day, a guy that had to be well into his 80s slowly walks in. It was an early afternoon before the typical rush at night, so he was able to walk right up to the counter and stare at our board of flavors, toppings, etc. You can see on his face he's getting irate for some reason. He's pacing quicker, here and there you can see his mouth open to talk, but he doesn't. And then finally, he speaks. "I want your smallest ice cream, but it's absolutely demeaning that I have to order a child size. I'm a grown man. I have children and grandchildren of my own." This goes on, and I'm unable to get a word in edgewise. He keeps going, and finally I interrupt. "How about this? I just give you the smallest size we have, call it a small, and charge you for our cheapest ice cream." For some reason, this answer wasn't acceptable. He goes back into his rant about being a grown man, and is now screaming at me about how insulted he was. I again reiterate, I can just give you a small ice cream, but no, anything beneath an institutional change wasn't going to stop this guy. He just kept going. Now other customers are starting to walk in and just watch him rant, screaming, "Do I look like a child?" and things like, "I have grandchildren older than you." Meanwhile, he's refusing to order something else, or just consider the smallest size as small rather than child size, which was written on the board, and won't leave either. The owner now comes in from the back to see what's going on because there's now a long line. This has been going on a good 10 minutes. As is usual in these situations, the owner introduces himself as the owner, which prompted the response, "Good, your employee insulted me." As the man explained how I insulted him, the owner pivoted to the same thing I did. "Can we just call it a small and be on with it?" This made things worse. Finally, after him screaming at the owner for a few more minutes, the owner says, "You came into my shop, don't like the name I used for my ice cream sizes, berated one of my employees, and are berating me. Please stop using the phrase disrespected because you're the only one being disrespectful." Usually, in internet stories, this is when the writer puts, "and everyone clapped," but no one did. The situation was just too awkward for them to acknowledge that they were paying attention. The old man went to talk and the owner cut him off and just said, "Let me be frank. Tell me what will make you happy and I'll do it." The old man stood there for a few seconds and just angrily said, "I'll never come back here again," and walked back out the door. In conclusion, I got screamed at because the ice cream shop I works at called a small a child size. In food service, I met so many customers who stormed out over stupid crap claiming they'd never return, but sadly, most of them did. Complaining is what makes them happy, and people in customer service put up with it longer than most. Yep. Is this the same in retail, or is it mainly a hospitality thing? Because I feel like I encountered enough of these for several lifetimes. I help my cousin out on jobs where he gets in over his head. One time our uncle went out for sandwiches and got them for the whole crew. My grown, 45-year-old cousin had a freaking meltdown on the job site and started throwing crap because his sandwich had pickles on it. He broke the windows of his own vehicle and destroyed about $1,000 worth of materials over pickles. We're both on the spectrum, but he was never disciplined as a child and allowed to lash out, so he does it frequently. This is the biggest one I've ever seen anyway. I used to work as a manager at a wings place. A lady and a guy got incredibly upset at us when they asked for their order and we didn't have it. "We've been waiting for 30 minutes. How isn't it done?" "We don't have any orders in the last week with that name. I don't know what to tell you." "Well, we paid for it." "Would it be under a different name perhaps?" "Oh yeah, our son ordered it. Try Jack Smith instead." Not actually his name, but you get it. "Okay, that's not showing up either. How about you show me your receipt and I can look up the confirmation number?" The girl hands me the receipt. The son ordered their food under the name EA Sports, It's in the Game. When I let them know what it was actually under and got the food for them, they legit were screaming at me and trying to say it was my fault. The guy started throwing chairs at other customers and hit the windows with a large rock. Police were called and they left. Eventually, the guy came back 3 hours later to yell at me and my crew more, and we called the police a second time. I pray for that son and I hope he's okay. His parents seemed a little off their rockers. I once had someone refuse to give me a name for an order, not food-related. The job was expected to take roughly half an hour. And they were like, "Can't you just remember us?" I said I might not be here when they get back, just give me any name. So they clearly made one up, something like John Smith. They came back hours later, even though they promised to be back in half an hour, and gave me their real name instead of the fake one. Then started getting crappy when I couldn't find it. I remembered who they were eventually, but I thought it might be a good lesson in why you need to remember your damn names. I've posted this before, but I witnessed some lady having a full-blown tantrum in a Culver's drive-thru. I was on the headset that day, and when she pulled up to the order screen, I asked for her order. She snapped back that she wasn't ready, so I told her to go ahead and order when she was ready. For whatever reason, that set her off because again she snapped back and said, "You know what, just for that, I will take my time." She sat silently in her car for a few minutes and I could hear the cars behind her starting to honk. The car directly behind her must have caught on to her just sitting there refusing to order, so he pulled around her, drove up to my window and asked if he could order directly from me. The other cars in line must have noticed as well, because when I handed him his receipt, they began to pull in front of the lady refusing to order and started a new line at my window ordering directly from me. The lady who refused to order went absolutely bananas. She laid on her horn, grabbing her steering wheel and started thrashing around, shaking her car violently, screaming at the top of her lungs that people were cutting in front of her. She eventually drove around to my drive-thru window, gave me the finger and did a burnout. I think that was the biggest tantrum I've seen an adult throw. I love imagining these people relaying stories like this to their loved one. "You won't believe how that B-word at the window told me to, checks notes, order when I was ready." Unfortunately, my grandma is one of these. She of course changes the tone of everything, so instead of, "Just let me know when you're ready to order," it's, "'Kay, let me know when you're ready," eye roll. A longtime parishioner entered church on Sunday and saw a new young family sitting in her pew. She told them that they'd have to move as they were sitting in the pew she'd occupied for worship services for many years. As I once described, when they refused to relocate, the lady said, in full voice for all to hear, that she wouldn't stand for their insubordination and that she was leaving and taking her substantial pledge with her. I mean, Jesus lost his crap completely at people trying to hustle outside of his dad's temple, and yet 2,000 years later, there's a massive sect of Christians that missed the memo. I do business with a local AT&T store. I was getting a phone for our company and this guy was trying to get an iPhone for his teenage daughter. I'm not sure what went on, but apparently they didn't have the exact phone she wanted, and they were going to have to order it. That wasn't good enough, so he started having a full-blown temper tantrum saying the sales associate was ruining his daughter's birthday gift. The manager comes out to see what's going on, and there's another customer who's in there, and this guy is like 6'5", goatee, bald head, roided up with a full sleeve tattoo, and he says, "Hey, calm down." And the angry dad said, "Who said that?" The bald giant said, "I did," in a very angry voice, and the dad just put his head down and shut up. The manager was trying to see what was going on, and the dad was like, "We're gonna go now." I wish I could say everyone clapped, but the sales associate was extremely grateful. Years ago when I was waitressing, a kid threw garbage into our potted plant and I made the kid remove it. Then the mom tried to yell at me, but a little old Israeli lady got up and told her off. This old lady was tiny, but steely. Like you could believe she had fired a machine gun during the war. The soccer mom skedaddled out of there. When I used to work at Best Buy, a woman was absolutely teed off and threatening to sue for false advertisement because a Kindle case was $2 cheaper than what was listed in the ads in the Sunday paper. Okay, so my early question about whether this happens as much in retail seems to have been definitively answered by a few other posts now. Hospo and retail slaves, unite! My own mother. We were getting food at a food truck. They must have pressed the wrong button or something because she got charged for $11 when it should have been $10. My mum immediately blows up about it, demanding they give her back her $1. The cashier apologized profusely and said it was a mistake. They got the manager or owner or whatever to come over and help refund the money. The whole time they're trying to figure the computer out, my mum is ranting and raving about how they were overcharging her on purpose to pocket the money since she didn't tip. She calls them thieves and criminals. I straight up told her, "I'll give you $1 right now if you stop," and of course she says it's all about the principle. After they fix it, we leave. She keeps ranting to me about it, so I make up an excuse to leave. Later in a text, she tells me she went to the nearest police station after that and made a report against them. I very much wish I could have seen the police officer's reaction. I bet they were dying laughing inside and probably threw her report away the moment she left. This woman is 40 years old. What in the actual frick? Ah, frick, you just reminded me of a client. I work in an animal hospital that called and left a message for the doctor she just saw stating, "I found some white fur on me, and I know it didn't come from my dog because he has black fur. I find this absolutely unacceptable, and I will be leaving a message with the hospital manager." Neither of us heard anything from the hospital manager. The last time I was at Heathrow Airport, I witnessed a woman in her 30s, dressed in business attire, literally kicking and screaming because they wouldn't let her take an open carton of juice through the security checkpoint. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My sister had the worst temper of anyone I've ever known. We were at the drive-thru at McDonald's. She had ordered McNuggets with barbecue sauce. When we got to the window, she was handed the nuggets but no sauce. She just sat there staring expectantly at the cashier. Finally, she said, "Well, are you going to give me my sauce or what?" The cashier turned to the side, away from the window, and my sister said, "Excuse me, are you deaf? Where's my sauce?" The cashier said, "I'm getting it." The cashier handed over fistfuls of sauce packets and didn't do it in a friendly way. So my sister threw half of the packets directly at the face of the cashier and called her the B word. Then she drove out of there like a bat out of hell. I absolutely hated going anywhere with my sister because she regularly caused a scene over the dumbest things. I have a friend that's similarly embarrassing no matter where we went. The hardware store won't cut the eaves shorter. The frick is wrong with you? Don't you know these won't fit in my fricking car? The ice cream place didn't have any hot fudge ready. What kind of fricking idiots are you people? I stopped hanging out with her because of that. I was at Friendly's with a group of friends. One of them brought their boyfriend with them. We all got our treats and sat down. This dude comes up to us and says, "Do you think I should complain about the slushie not having enough syrup?" We all kind of agree that sure, it's okay to see if they can do something to fix it. He goes up there and talks to the girl at the register. I couldn't make out everything, but essentially she told them that they made it the way they were told and she couldn't do anything. He takes what remains of his slushie and slams it on the counter, getting it everywhere. He yells at her that she can take the drink back then. A manager tells him that he's got to go. We were all just in shock. I didn't even know where to put my face, I was so embarrassed. Him, on the other hand, he wasn't ashamed at all. My friend defends her boyfriend, saying that it wasn't a big deal and they should really have fixed his drink. Customer service for a doctor's office credit card program. Spent 45 minutes trying to help a doctor change his password. I couldn't actually help them because every time I would tell them to do something specific, they would do this stress, sigh, sobbing kind of thing. Would remind me every 30 seconds that he went to school for 8 years so he wouldn't have to deal with this. Mind you, he was clearly in his 20s and 30s, not an old guy that has an excuse to not know how to do it. After the 45 minutes of this rotation, he finally passed the phone to his receptionist. We shared a laugh over his attitude, and we reset the password in 30 seconds. As someone else who's worked tech support for doctors' offices, I feel this pain so deeply in my soul. I honestly have begun to wonder if you can't keep up with technological advancements required for your job, like EMRs and password requirements, how in the heck am I supposed to believe you can keep up with medical advancements too? Yikes. I've seen a stranger throw a tantrum because he didn't know what to order for breakfast. Asked for input, but for some reason got angry when our cashier suggested a breakfast sandwich. My uncle threw a tantrum and stormed off to bed because he was the first person out when we were playing Monopoly. The following night, he again was the first person out, but instead of storming off to bed, he sat there and sulked because, and I quote, "Last night I didn't get any. I wonder why." First out in Monopoly is better than winning, actually. I sell safety equipment to major companies. You have to have paperwork to get discounts for this stuff. I've had multiple grown men come in, tell me they work for X and they want the company discount. I tell them I need their forms and they begin throwing a fit. They throw around the whole, "Do you know who I am?" bit, and get even madder when I do not in fact know who they are. If you were such a big shot, why don't you have the form? At the Burning Man entry gate, we take special delight in making sure that the privileged jerks follow the rules. Since we're the ones in control, it's more like malicious bureaucracy than malicious compliance, but the stories are similar enough. Most of these morons are no-name DJs and artists. No, we will not call the boss of Burning Man because you said you're friends with her. So we have a saying, "Do you know who I think I am?" I don't know who thought that trying to heft around your minor celebrity status to a bunch of free spirits in the desert would go well, but they fully deserved all the sarky treatment they received. The one I will always remember happened over 20 years ago. Long story slightly shorter, and this was back before September 11th, a man and his girlfriend came to the gate at the airport. There was some mix-up where the girlfriend had given her luggage to the skycap, but hadn't checked in for the flight, so she didn't have a boarding pass. The flight was oversold and there was no seat available for her. It was a flight to Washington, D.C., and it was the last one out until tomorrow morning. When this guy finds out she can't get on the plane, he goes ballistic. He literally starts screaming at the gate agent. In a post-September 11th world, I'm reasonably certain he would have been arrested or at least kicked out of the airport. He's going on and on about how important he is and that he's a member of some platinum club. How dare his girlfriend not get on the plane? People with the cheap tickets should be booted to accommodate her. He'll reach out to the corporate offices, etc. Basically, he was making a huge public butt out of himself. Well, it wasn't this gate agent's first rodeo either. She let him scream himself out, and when he took a breath, she looked at him and said, "There is exactly one person who can get your girlfriend onto the plane, and that person is me. I suggest you take a seat, be patient, and I'll see what I can do." He started going off again, and she said louder than him, "I will see what I can do." Finally, he sat down. She made some phone calls, typed on her computer, and finally came over the loudspeaker saying, "This flight is overbooked. Do we have any customers willing to take a later flight for X amount of flight vouchers?" Silence. She asked a couple more times, raising the ante, and again, silence. Now, I had nowhere to be until Tuesday, so I could have easily taken a flight the next day, but I'll be darned if that idiot is going to get his way. Seems like everyone else there felt the same way. No one took the offer. Eventually, she called the two of them over and said, "I'm sorry, I've offered the max amount of vouchers I can and no one's taking it. I need to start boarding now. If she needs to get out tonight, she can try another airline or I can put her on tomorrow's flight right now." The guy was like, "Frick you," and walked off with his very embarrassed girlfriend in tow as he was muttering under his breath, "Bye-bye." If the guy hadn't been such a first-class prick to the gate agent, who literally had nothing to do with the situation, she could have taken my seat and been on her way. Oh man, I've been dying for a question like this. Does anyone remember the Rick and Morty Szechuan sauce release at McDonald's a few years ago? Anyways, my friend loves the show, but couldn't go due to work, so I went to try and get some for him. There was a line of people who'd been waiting for a while. Apparently, some of the workers gave them out to people in the drive-thru, so they were all out and all they had were posters. A couple of guys were throwing complete temper tantrums and screaming and cussing out the workers. for not properly handing out the sauce packets. After screaming at them for a good 10 to 15 minutes, the guy demands a poster. The worker says they have to purchase a meal in order to get the poster, and the guy flips out again and orders a meal in a really condescending tone. As soon as he gets the meal and his poster, he takes his meal and starts throwing it against the walls, and then takes his 2 children with the poster and walks away while cussing at them on the way out. The next few guys in the line do the same thing. They only had like 5 to 8 posters. The vast majority of people towards the front all threw baby tantrums and threw their food and drinks everywhere, making a huge mess. Luckily, I recorded a decent amount of it. Absolutely insane how childish these grown men were acting over a fricking sauce packet. Most of them had their children with them too. It was honestly just so insane, I couldn't believe it. I worked at McDonald's in high school. There were a few, but one stands out above all of the others. It's lunchtime and we're busy. The Filet-O-Fish is not a particularly popular sandwich, so we only ever had a couple of pieces of fish ready to avoid having to throw them away. A guy comes into the drive-thru and orders 4. I kid you not, as his order is popping up on our screen, the whole timer for the 2 fish we had already made was going off. We have to fry 2 regardless, so we decide to just make all 4 fresh. The manager apologizes and tells the guy to pull forward and wait. He's not happy, but he does. Meanwhile, we keep serving people who didn't order fish. After the 3rd car or so gets their order and leaves, the guy is in the lobby demanding to see the manager. He wants to know why he's still waiting since we're clearly serving other people. The manager explains that none of these people ordered fish and that the fish will be ready in a few minutes. Apologizes again for the wait. The guy is teed off. He starts yelling about how it's ridiculous that we have no fish ready. The manager explains how the whole timer went off and she wasn't about to serve anyone expired food. Since we had to make a couple anyway, we're making you all 4 fresh. Most people would be happy that they weren't served questionable food, but not this guy. The guy went ballistic. He started yelling about how we should have served him the 2 we had, and we shouldn't serve anyone else until his order, blah blah blah, you get the idea. Then he threatens my manager with physical violence if he's not served his order right now. She tells him he needs to go out to his car right now or she'll be calling the police. The guy storms out of the restaurant, slamming the door so hard behind him that he broke it. A few seconds later, we hear screeching tires as he leaves the parking lot without his fish. My father. Probably more to do with the fact that I was related to him and it ruined a day trip, but here it is. So at the time, we, mother, father, teenage brother, and preteen me, lived close to a great beach and there was a small amusement park next to it. A variety of issues meant going there as a family for a day out was a special treat, and something that was highly anticipated. We hadn't decided if we'd do the beach, doing some boogie boarding, or the amusement park, water slide, and crazy golf. So we took the boards with us, but in the end decided not to use them. This was very bad. My mother was a deficient human being for bringing them with us and committing the crime of bringing unnecessary items on a day trip. In the car park, in full view of everyone, there he was, screaming. He threw his hat on the ground and was jumping up and down, clenching his fists as if he were having a vertical seizure. Of course, we knew not to say anything because he would just become violent, and we had to walk on eggshells for the rest of the day. I have since gone in no contact with him, and he was shocked, convinced that someone had manipulated me into it, because he never did anything that would make someone not want to be in a relationship with him. What is the most awesome way you saw someone quit their job? One of my cooks calmly walked to the ice machine in the middle of the shift. I didn't think too much of it until he came back with a bucket of ice and dumped it in the fryers. The entire kitchen went dead silent for what seemed like forever. Then all of a sudden, the low boiling noise started. Within seconds, the fryers are throwing boiling water all over the place. About 30 seconds later, they catch on fire, and the fire suppression system goes off. It sprays a 6-inch layer of foam everywhere. The guy walked to the microphone in the kitchen and calmly says, "F all of you, I'm out." We had to shut down for 2 days to clean up the mess, and the cook was arrested and sued. It was epic, but it couldn't have been worth it in the end. Working at a movie theater just kept popping popcorn, like overflowing onto the ground. Didn't even look away until the manager said, "You're fired." I worked at a movie theater in high school. One of the other kids who worked there was getting super sick of our mostly insufferable, greasy-haired, limping whale of a boss. So one day, our boss asked him to clean out all the garbage in the back room, and he drops his pants to the floor, throws 2 birds in the air, and quits. Then he walked out from behind the counter, through the lobby full of guests, to the parking lot, with his pants around his ankles and his middle fingers in the air. Most hilarious crap I've ever seen. Friend works at a major shopping center in a deli. It was his last day anyway, so he wasn't exactly trying to get fired. He changed one of the signs on the trays of meat to hand-strangled veal. Not one person noticed all day. I had just walked into a Taco Bell about a minute before where someone quit on the spot and freaking trashed the place. I mean food and cups and bags and drinks all over the place behind the counter. One worker girl was frantically on the phone with the police, just freaking out and saying, "He trashed the place! He trashed the place!" Needless to say, I did not get my bean burrito. Worked at a restaurant a few years ago that was the pits. It was a terrible place to work, but the tips were great, so I stuck with it. One guy had had enough of it after his paycheck bounced, so he went into the manager's office, looked her square in the eye and said, "I quit, you frickin' B-word," and placed his apron on the desk. As he was walking through the kitchen, he took one of the sacks of flour we used to make dough with, threw it over his shoulder and said, "This is mine," and walked out. Although the man's defiance is admirable, some of the follow-up questions make a valid point about his choice of plunder. One commenter summarizes the points nicely. "If you're going to appropriate food in lieu of your paycheck, I suggest you raid the filet mignon and the saffron, not the flour. There's nothing worse than getting a paycheck and it gets freaking denied. I usually just take my check straight to the bank my boss uses and get cash, then put it in my bank that's further away later on in the week. I'll never forget sitting at the drive-thru and the lady coming back to the window and saying, 'Sir, your boss doesn't have enough money in his account to cover this.'" Some background first. I worked at a company that had an owner who was not paying people for their final 2 weeks when they resigned. I was one of those who got stiffed, later got my pay when the state intervened. After I quit, a former employee of mine, a tech writer working on a big project from his home office, decided that the missed and late paydays and horrible treatment from the owner was enough. He decided to quit without notice. He gathered up all the equipment that the company gave him and he took it into the office. He dropped it on the floor and said, "I'm out, B-words." One of the directors asked him if he was going to be available for any transition or other information exchange, to which he replied, "When you pay all the people who've left and still haven't received their pay, I will transition knowledge." To my knowledge, that transition never occurred, yet he received his final 2 weeks' pay and unpaid vacation without issue. Go figure. The Philly Run. A friend worked in Northern Virginia at an office job he hated. On the day he decided he was done, he clocked in, left, drove to Philadelphia over 2.5 hours for a cheesesteak, returned to the office job and clocked out. A bartender I worked with had a really bad run, was a little bit strung out on white snow and life in general, but anyways, we had this really bad day at work and this woman kept pestering us about the service. Eventually, he just took the money she was holding to get our attention, got his lighter out from his pocket, set fire to the bill and held it in front of her while saying something like, "F you, you stupid fricking B-word." Then he just left and never came back. He's kinda crazy, so I'm happy he left. I didn't work with him, but I'm reminded of the JetBlue male flight attendant who popped the emergency exit slide, cracked open 2 beers, drank them on the way down the slide, and left. When the police arrived at his house, he was in the middle of doing the deed with his wife. I guess there comes a point when enough is enough. I like to think I can drink fast, but 2 beers on the slide? I need to shake this man's hand, or probably give him a fist pound through the prison glass. I was shopping at a Walmart one night, probably around 8 or 9, for some laundry detergent. As I was looking for the right aisle, a navy blue collared shirt went soaring from cash register 11 to aisle 14. I turned to my right and saw a shirtless black man with a 90s Mike Tyson fade, a golden Jesus necklace, and a chest tattoo that read Stu Manchu. After watching his shirt slowly float to the ground, he proceeded to go to his register's intercom and say, "Attention all customers, this N-word just quit." After putting his high-flying middle finger down, he ducked underneath his register, went ahead and pulled out a folded razor scooter with green wheels. He assertively put on his JanSport backpack, pried open the scooter, flung the base of it around his hip, and with one rooster swipe of the shiny Walmart floor, he went from 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds. The automatic doors diverged like the Red Sea, and the man, without any regret, scooted his way into the arms of unemployment. Been working at Walmart for a good 7 years. The only time anyone actually quit in a way to be any type of story happened about 3 or so years ago. He was a CSM, or a customer service manager, and was at the return desk trying to help these 2 real annoying ladies. They were trying to return something with no receipt. Problem besides the missing receipt was you could tell the item was bought many, many years ago. So once he declined it, they started to cause a scene, making fun of him for working at Walmart and saying he wasn't going anywhere in life, etc., etc., What they didn't know was Walmart was actually his second job, and he actually worked for some government branch. After about 15 minutes of their hazing, he quietly removed his badge, came around the counter, removed his shirt, got on the intercom, yelled he quit, then looked at the two ladies and asked, "Now that I don't work here anymore, would you like to go outside like you suggested earlier?" They were shocked and just standing there. Then he just replied with, "I freaking thought so, you stupid hood rats," and then just walked out. While I was working a crappy dishwashing job part-time, one of the other guys who did the shift before me was pretty scummy. Imagine your stereotypical British chav, and it was exactly him. The big dishwashing machine was a little excitable. It would blast water towards the opening hatch so hard that it would leak pretty badly even when sealed shut. So imagine the look of surprise on my face when I walked in for my shift to see a buck-toothed chav, completely undressed, being blasted by scalding hot water from head to toe from an open dishwasher, yet still wearing a backwards-facing cap that was surviving the ordeal. He looked at me and I managed to decipher the opening sentence to, "Done with this crap." Still undressed and soaked, he confidently strode to his Mini Cooper and drove home. I never saw him again after that. Does being a real prick count? I knew a guy who quit Dairy Queen by unplugging all of the freezers and leaving. At my last job, I was working for a telecommunications company which essentially required us to work tons of overtime. I averaged 85 hours a week over a 5-year period. The money was amazing, but the job burned people out. There was one guy, John, who was married to this awful woman. She was clearly cheating on him, she wouldn't work, but he didn't want to leave her because of their kids. As a way to hide from the rest of his life, he was there for 16 years and was an exemplary employee. One day, the guy comes into work dressed in flip-flops, a Hawaiian shirt, and shorts. Dress code was slacks and a company button-down shirt. He drops his set of company keys and his company phone at the manager's desk, was an open bullpen so everyone could see, and said, "Well, the old lady got killed in a car accident yesterday, so F this job and F all of you. I quit." He then gave the boss's boss, who was a real butthole, a 2-finger salute and walked out. He was the longest tenured employee they'd ever had. Everyone knew his situation and we all felt bad for him. The boss still gave him a good reference because, as he explained it, everyone has a breaking point. John reached his many years ago. He was given a gift from God in that car accident. Why would I take that away from him? My old boss was a cool dude who smoked a lot of green herb to deal with the stress of that job. That is grim as all heck, but I'm happy for John strolling into the sunset. Also, my long complaint about hospitality hours rarely reached 85 hours a week, and I was done with that after a year. Don't know how these guys blue-pilled themselves into 5 years of that. Co-worker was on his last weekend shift and had already landed a job elsewhere. He never got along with management, but he did his job very well. Call center type of work with 24/7, 365-day support. We have 4 people that work on the weekends, and you have to scan your ID badge and then immediately punch in your 4-digit code. The doors were so scumbaggy that people on the weekday shift would just enter through the main lobby rather than fight the doors. Well, according to his story and the security tapes that support his story, it went down like this. He arrived at 7:50 a.m. and tried to punch in his card. Failed the first time, no big deal. Second attempt was a fail. After his 5th try, he said he became so enraged that he decided to roundhouse kick the keypad. This put a huge hole in the wall. He calmly reached into the wall and scanned his badge and punched in his code. The door opened perfectly. He worked Saturday and Sunday, came in Monday to pick up his check and was promptly told that it was being held for damages to the property. Funniest story ever, especially watching the tapes. It should be noted that he'd had McDonald's for breakfast and had to drop the biggest deuce ever. So waiting for the door to cooperate was apparently not an option. In conclusion, co-worker freaked out at the keypad and roundhouse kicked it. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was bartending at the time. One of our bosses had bushy red hair. One night our general manager told him he needed to get a haircut. He proceeded to get quite drunk after work and showed up with a shaved head and a Ziploc bag full of his hair, which he slid under the door to the office. This happened at a Best Buy I was working at right before I started. The story goes that a woman was at the Geek Squad desk yelling at one of our agents, telling him how bad he was at his job and just being a general B-word. After about 15 to 20 minutes or so of him trying to explain what was wrong with her computer and putting up with this behavior, he finally just snapped. My general manager was standing next to him, so he turned to my GM and said, "I quit," then turned back to the lady with enough volume so that the warehouse team could hear him clearly on the opposite side of the store and yelled directly in her face, "Ma'am, you're such a frickin' C-word. and then left forever. Legend has it that in certain parts of the store you can still hear the C word echoing around the walls. Another time as an assistant manager of a retail outlet, I was passed up for manager yet again, and a drinking buddy of the regional manager got the manager job with zero experience. I'd already been running the store alone for a few months since the last manager quit. I made sure I had all the keys. The next morning I ordered an Egg McMuffin meal and a coffee, and I sat and watched the entire mall open except for our store. A few hours later, I got a call. "Yep, I know the store is closed." "I know, because it can't possibly open because I quit. I'm watching the store right now. Definitely closed." They lost most of the day's sales. Screw them. Not really ballsy, but by far one of the funnier things I've ever seen. I was sitting in McDonald's enjoying some chicken nuggets sometime at night when one of the workers starts yelling and tromping around. He tires himself out pretty quickly and leaves with an adamant, "Screw all y'all." Not 5 minutes later, he walks back in and says, "I bet y'all didn't think I was coming back." He keeps bragging about his stellar achievement and then slowly slips in to one of the workers. "Hey, what time are you off? I need a ride." I lost it at that. In conclusion, McDonald's worker quits, leaves in a storm, then walks back in asking for a ride when he can't find one. In all fairness, not many people can work at McDonald's and afford a car. A man and a woman I worked with were fraternizing. There was a no fraternizing clause in our contract. I knew them both fairly well. They told me, and I've seen them together outside of work. It was a stupid clause, but it paid well. Anyway, company meeting, talking about new directions and how they'll start enforcing certain things more strictly. Manager asks for more questions or comments. The guy raises his hand, the manager called on him. "F you and F your rules, I quit." He stood up, walked over to the woman and kissed her, turned and gave the manager a finger and walked out. I started clapping. No one joined in. Was at the trash collection facility disposing of an old sofa and maybe a dead working girl when the guy driving one of the blue recycling trucks got into an argument with his boss. The boss told him after he dumped his load of recyclables, he needed to park the truck in front of the shop and come collect his last paycheck because he was fired. I couldn't believe the boss's audacity to expect him to finish working after he had already been fired. The guy flipped the handle on the truck while the boss was walking away, pulled the pins on the tailgate, and dumped 4 tons of glass bottles in the middle of the parking lot. The noise was unbelievable, the boss was shouting at him, the employee flipped him the bird, went into the office, and collected his check. It was unfreaking believable. Summer job at landscaping. The job required us to take company trucks to the houses and businesses whose lands were to be scaped. I'd only been there for the summer, but the guy who quit was a full-timer of 4 years. One day he accidentally went to a wrong address. "Hey, free flower bed touch-up," and the boss calls him, threatening to make him pay. He's in an adjacent town at the time, so he calls his girlfriend to pick him up, leaves the truck where it is, calls the boss, quits, and tells him to go and get his truck. A technician we used to have partially owned an adult club. He came in one morning, ripped out of his gourd in a limo. 3 of the girls who worked for him were there also. He got out of the limo, climbed up onto his toolbox in underwear and cowboy boots only, dancing like crazy. Tells most of the management to get lost, climbs back down and leaves. Needless to say, we hired him back 4 years later. My boss told me that by the end of the day I had to submit the name of one of my 3 employees to be laid off. After discussing with my girlfriend on the phone, I wrote my own name down on a piece of paper and handed it to my boss. The look on his face was priceless. I worked at a bar when I was younger. Actually, I was a minor, but I needed to work, and bartending was one of the few jobs that had a schedule that allowed me to go to school at the same time. The 40-something-year-old owner constantly harassed me. I don't mean flirtations or passes, I mean asking me to suck his eggplant, commenting on my juicy meld, and slapping my butt. Real Romeo. He even had an apartment above the bar. I couldn't complain to labor standards because I was working under the table, being underage and all. Anyway, fortunately I had the fortitude to say no and keep myself safe from him, but after a while he became harder to dodge and I couldn't handle other things that were going on at the bar, so I decided to quit. On the night I decided was my last, I didn't charge any customer, mostly regulars, for any of their booze. Ended up giving away a couple of $1,000 in alcohol on the house, and pocketing some pretty generous tips. In the same way, I couldn't report him, he couldn't report me. So in the end, I felt it was a pretty fair F you. In conclusion, boss at a bar was a creep, so I gave out a bunch of booze on the night that I quit. Honestly, good on you. Screw that guy. A couple of $1,000 in the hole might not make a jerk like that reform his ways, but at least you hit him where it hurts. My first day at a new chain convenience store, graveyard shift. I show up, no uniform, old chain was bought out by a new chain, and the clerk is nowhere to be found. The parking lot is full of people loading store products into their cars. The most epic was a lady with a trunk full of Huggies, and every 40-ounce beer bottle the store had left. My first thought was that he was dead or tied up in the back. I looked around for him and couldn't find him. For all I knew, he could have been one of the people emptying the store out. I went behind the counter and the cash register was empty and 2 guys are working hacksaws on the safe under the counter. It took me a while to go through the paperwork thrown everywhere until I found the store manager's phone number. I called him up. Now that I think about it, I'm surprised the phone was still there, and he says to call the police. He's on his way. I told the 2 guys working the safe I was calling the cops, and just as casual as you please, they got up and walked out, announcing to everyone what was happening. They all just casually left. Everyone got out of there before the cops and the manager showed up, and that's when I noticed the door. There was a sign taped to it. It said, "Clerk just quit. The store is unattended. Take what you want." I spent the rest of the shift helping the manager clean up and basically only sold gas the rest of the week while waiting on new inventory to come in. I worked at a pipe drilling company. They issued a substance test. He told me he was accused of cheating, so he got upset, undid his overalls and with nothing underneath, proceeded to talk Ace Ventura style out of his butthole, saying that he would never cheat, then stood up and whipped his eggplant around lasso style, followed by a move we now call the peeing helicopter. Managed to fill the test cup. 13-panel test and he was positive for 12. The woman giving the test had 1 week to go before retiring but said it didn't matter and quit right then and there, and left a little less dry than when she'd come in. In conclusion, spinning around and peeing gets you fired. I used to work at this restaurant, and one day I got a frantic call from my boss asking me if I could come in and work. Apparently, the cashier and the sushi chef, who were dating, just flat out left. The only other people working there were the cooks, and they had no idea they were gone until a good half hour or so later. I thought it was pretty ballsy and stupid of them to just leave the restaurant unattended. Someone could have easily stolen one of the TVs, money from the register, or even stuff from the sushi bar. My Spanish teacher once told me a great story about how he quit his telemarketing job. He was in college at our crappy community college and just decided to stop going to work. He went back 6 months later, acted like he'd done nothing wrong and they didn't notice. He never went to work at the telemarketing center ever again. A year after, they called him and told him it wasn't working out. I'm a lifeguard. At our facility, we have certain whistle signals that we use to signify certain things. Well, one of those signals was one that meant spinal injury, and not just some, "oh, he's got whiplash" kind of thing, like, "oh crap, his spine is broken." Anyway, this guy apparently had had enough of working in our water park and decided to just leave his stand in the middle of his shift while blowing that signal on his whistle. Paramedics were called, and by the time they arrived, he was long gone. It was quite an interesting day. A couple of years ago, my friends and I sat at the Rhine and we were having a great time. It was a hot summer day and we had a little barbecue. On the Rhine, there are a lot of tourist boats cruising up and down between Koblenz and Cologne. We sat there and suddenly we heard a loud splash from one of the smaller boats that was approaching us. It was a guy who jumped off the boat and swam to the shore, got out of the water and walked away. Later, I read in the newspaper that this was an employee who'd had enough. Still brings a smile to my face. I worked in an office, and one guy collected all of the little round paper discs from whenever we used the 3-hole punch. He put them all into an empty coffee can, almost full, and then he rage quit after a dispute with the boss and flung that can, full of tiny paper discs, all over the office like confetti. It's been over a year since he left, and we're still picking those things up. No joking, an employee came to work with a Glock and domed himself in the parking lot. What nerve! Didn't even give his 2-week notice. My friend worked at a popular fast food chain. Their policy was to throw out food that was left by the end of the day. The manager was a huge jerk and was being even worse on this particular day. He also refused to give my friend his overtime pay. A few hours before closing time, my friend grabbed 2 bags and stuffed with burgers and chicken. His co-workers were in on this. He walked home while handing out food to homeless people. Oh, and he wrote, "You're a prick" on the manager's MacBook with a Sharpie. What are some very comforting facts? In Switzerland, it's illegal to own just one guinea pig because they're very social animals. It's considered animal abuse to only have one. Oh, my heart. Crows and ravens love to play in the snow. One of their favorite activities is rolling down hills. Scientists in 2020 made a massive breakthrough in curing blindness, like verging on a cure. It was masked by the virus headlines, though. If I'm not mistaken, it was with children who had been blind since birth, under the age of 10 anyway, but still. All those embarrassing and cringy moments that come flooding into your mind when you least expect them, nobody else remembers them, and every last one of us has them. It's part of this complicated process called living. While you're busy remembering yours, everyone else is remembering their own. It's in the past. Nothing you can do right now can make it any better. Chalk it up as a lesson and reap the experience. About 65% of America's aluminum is currently recycled. Every minute, an average of 123,097 aluminium cans are recycled. On average, Americans recycle 2 out of every 3 aluminum cans they use. The average aluminum can contains more than 50% post-consumer recycled aluminum. It's just aluminum, but it shows that we can, as a society, recycle over half the stuff we use, and we can just start keeping the world clean. That, and a push to renewable energy would be nice. Bees take naps in flowers. So yeah, it's okay to need a nap. Even busy bees do. I too like to rest on my laurels. I grow pumpkins and the long vines are covered in big bell-shaped golden flowers. Every morning I go out and take a peek inside, ever since I discovered that they always have 2 or 3 sleeping bees in them. Bees that have spent the night safe and warm inside. Little bee hotel rooms, as it were. Although it's very cold and the vines aren't producing pumpkins right now, I'm leaving them in place just for the bees. If you make it to the airport without dying, you've already passed the deadliest part of plane travel. Cows have best friends. So do horses. They work significantly harder when together, and they tend to scare less easily. Now that I think about it, most mammal pets and domesticated animals that I've been aware of have often ended up having one friend that they've become closer to, and it's always adorable, so that's great. Swedish blood donors receive a text whenever their blood is used to help someone. So do Australians. And folks from the UK. Some fish like to be pet. Clownfish are attracted to people. I went snorkeling around some reefs, and after wiggling your fingers at them like a worm, they come swim up to you and swam between my fingers. All of the cardigans Mr. Rogers wore on camera were knit by his mother. Mr. Rogers' facts are the most wholesome facts. His favorite number was 143 because the words, "I love you" have 1, 4, and 3 letters. There's a lighthouse in Massachusetts that blinks 143 and is known as the I Love You Lighthouse. Minot's Ledge in Cohasset. Your body is home to its own unique ecosystem, the human gut. It sounds gross, but billions of little creatures living inside you are helping you digest things, dispose of waste, and survive natural toxins in the food you consume. If you ever feel like you're useless or that your existence means nothing, that's not true. You literally mean the world to your gut flora. Goldfish can recognize their owners. Damn, he's been watching you this whole time and you didn't even know. I used to have a goldfish who would suck up a piece of stone and spit it against the glass to make a noise, so I'd know that he wanted to be fed. The darn fish trained me. There's a volunteer organization called No One Dies Alone. You're at a Sacred Hearts medical center, you're terminal, and you need a companion. From someone to talk to or just someone to hold your hand, they'll make sure someone will be there for you. Other hospitals have this too. In dog or wolf movies where they use real-life dog actors, the film's editors sometimes have to add CGI tails because the dogs can't stop wagging their tails because they're so happy. I used to have a sweetheart of a dog who loved to roughhouse. She was big and her play growls sounded scary if you didn't know how gentle she really was. Ever since her, when I see attack dogs on screen, I notice they often have the same body language and tone that she had. Otters hold each other's hands when they sleep so their mate won't drift away. Dogs make cute little sneezing sounds to tell you they're playing and not fighting. Jupiter's gravitational mass is so immense, modern science believe it's been protecting us from meteors for millions of years. Thank you, Jupiter. You're welcome, Jupiter 2020. It's highly likely your pet dreams of you in their sleep. Stan Lee started creating the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Iron Man, etc. at around 40. So even if you think that you can't get anything out of your life, you can still push yourself creatively and leave a lasting impact on the world at an older age. I used to be a caregiver at a retirement home. I took care of a lady who started painting when she was 60 and kind of had an accidental career. She sold lots of paintings to hotels and in street fairs. She had a 20-year run as a painter. Wow, that's wonderful. There are many examples when people changed their careers late in their lives. Ray Kroc spent his career as a milkshake device salesman before buying McDonald's at age 52 in 1954. He grew it into the world's biggest fast food franchise. Anna Mary Robertson Moses, better known as Grandma Moses, began her prolific painting career at 78. In 2006, one of her paintings sold for $1.2 million. Previously, she was a housekeeper and farm laborer. Larry David got his start as a writer for Saturday Night Live when he was in his late 30s, but he wasn't exactly successful. As he told Vanity Fair, "The sketches would get cut. I only had one sketch on the entire year." Then, when he turned 42, he co-created Seinfeld, and the rest is TV sitcom history. Harrison Ford was a carpenter until his late 30s. Age is no barrier to do what interests you. It's never too late to start again. Pillow fighting is a real recognized sport in Canada. It was founded in Toronto in 2004 by the Pillow Fighting League. I want this on ESPN right the frick now. It's on ESPN 8, the ACO. Scientists have discovered that rats love playing hide-and-seek and squeal with joy when finding or being found. I've always wanted a pet rat. This made me want one even more. Make sure to get multiple. They need rat buddies or they get depressed. I have 2 and they are very charming fellows. Smiling is actually contagious. When out and about, if you think someone's looking at you, smile. If they smile too, they were probably looking at you. Yeah, but then if they weren't looking at you, now you're a creep smiling at someone. Personally, as a person in Northern Europe, I found that smiling and patting the seat next to one on public transport is a great way to make people look anywhere but at you, and to guarantee that that seat will remain free. My boyfriend has a panic and anxiety disorder. Whenever he gets a panic attack, one of our cats will sit on him and purr loudly. It always comforts him and calms him down. We always joke that she's our little support animal. She's very attuned to our emotions and feelings. When my grandmother passed away and I was very sad, she would not leave me alone. She would just sit next to me in silence or occasionally let out a small mew to inform me she was still there. So, as a conclusion, even if you're having a crap day, your pet still loves you. I heard cat purrs are the perfect frequency to encourage healing. Also, cats secrete a hormone which makes humans happy. That's a very good cat. When they're injured, they'll also sometimes purr for this reason, to heal themselves. 1. A penguin was once knighted in Norway. 2. Blind people can smile even though they've never seen one. It's just human nature. 3. The voice actors of Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse got married in real life. A knighted penguin that holds the rank of brigadier lives in Edinburgh Zoo. He was actually promoted in 2016. The French actors of Marge and Homer Simpson also got married. Admitting you're wrong is not a show of weakness. It's a necessary step to become better. Liechtenstein once deployed 80 men for protecting the border against Austria. Despite their worries, they saw exactly 0 combat. When they called it a day, they returned home, with 81 men, because an Italian bloke bumped into them and wanted to come and live in Liechtenstein. They literally made a friend on the way. But the real Homeland Defense was the friend they made along the way. An Eider Down comforter by Matuk sells for over $16,000. Eider Down is harvested by collecting it from the eider's nest, making it the only down product that doesn't result in harm to the bird. I don't know, if I was an eider bird, I'd be pretty teed off if someone kept nicking my bed every time I left it alone for a minute. The people who harvest the nest keep a schedule so they only nick a nest a bird is done with, since birds typically only use the nest during mating, egg care, and chick seasons. So, when a human just leaves their old mattress out on the sidewalk, it's trashy, but when a bird does it, it's $16,000. Think of all the worst days in your life. You've made it through every single one of them, and you're still going strong. There's always another day on the other side. A group of pugs is called a grumble. If you've lost someone and you feel like they are completely gone from your life, think about the impact they had on you and on your loved ones, on others, and think about how that impact continues to live on throughout all of life. That impact won't die with them either. The chain of life goes on. Existing is hard, but most things around you are also alive and going through their own cycles. So in this way, you're in this together. Malala Yousafzai, the girl who was shot in the head by the Taliban for insisting on going to school, completed her final exams in the University of Oxford several years ago. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Whenever I've experienced heartbreak or something scary or intimidating, I remind myself I'm not the first person to have ever gone through, and for some reason I always find it comforting. I'm not the first person to be scared or sad, and thousands of others have gotten through what I'm going through, and if they can get through it, why can't I? I'm stating that this is something I find comforting when I'm needing to cope. It doesn't mean it will work for everyone, and I don't view it as others have gone through this, so my feelings are not valid. It's more of, thousands of other people have felt this way before, and if they can figure out how to cope with it or navigate or heal from it, then why can't I? This is just one of the many tools I have in my coping toolbox that I use. It's me telling myself, if other people can figure out how to get through this situation and experience, then I can too. I'm just drawing inspiration from others. Reddit isn't the worst thing you could be doing. Can you tell my parents? Thanks. You're not as bad or troubled as you paint yourself to be in your head. I sure hope so. No one remembers all the stupid crap you did as a teenager. If you cringe at something you did when you were younger, then that's because you've matured far enough to know that you were being stupid back then. I find it comforting to know that the very reason I feel bad is that I've stopped being that bad. Everyone has crapped their pants at least once. That's some real crap. I know that it's true because, babies, but now I genuinely wonder if there are people who have never crapped their pants in their entire adult lives. I mean, there have been a whole bunch of people in the history of this world. Did anyone hit that lifetime achievement? What age should we say the competition starts from? Age 6? Given all the atoms in the universe are recycled in various ways, having formed in the first stars, our entire body has already experienced billions of years of each atom's own personal history. Even more comforting, it's plausible those atoms will eventually become part of someone else in the future, and will continue to exist in various forms, transforming continuously until the end of time itself. So in a way, we're connected to something absolutely eternal, and our ultimate fate is to be spread across the stars. Hell, depending how deep you want to get, there's also a tiny, tiny chance that your pattern of DNA will form entirely by chance again, creating someone that is biologically you, but with a whole new memory, experiences, and history. Basically, everyone and everything is connected. The best part? None of this is based on religion or wishful thinking. It's actual established and current scientific fact. No matter how anxious you feel you are, no matter how ridden by fear you feel you are, every single one of us is the genetic survivor of hundreds of thousands of years of survivors. Each one of us came from a line of people who made the next correct, intuitive move, survived incredibly difficult things, and were able to pass their genes on. So almost to the biological level, you can relax into a trust that when the moment comes, where you will be faced with the biggest challenge, you'll be able to draw on a deep reservoir of shared human consciousness that will say, now it's time to make the next move, and we can do this. Elizabeth Gilbert. Van Gogh didn't start painting until his late 20s. Samuel L. Jackson didn't even get his first big role until his 40s. It's never too late to be who you might have been. It should be mentioned that Van Gogh sold only one painting in his whole life. Technically, Van Gogh sold hundreds of paintings in his lifetime, just not his own. He used to work for an art dealer. Huh. America had a black president for longer than the Confederacy existed. I like this. I'm comforted. Hey, I'm seeing how you're getting some comments from non-Americans about this. As an Australian, I know most of my fellow Aussies I talked to were really gosh darn impressed that happened. Your dog loves you. People see you as 20% more attractive than you see yourself as. And a lot of people need to hear this. Like, it breaks my heart that people don't believe they're good looking, when in reality, you are a gorgeous son of a witch. I know, for all of you saying 20% of 0 is still 0, screw you, love yourself and accept yourself. If not, I'll make you love yourself. During the Second World War, a Muslim man once owned a mosque in Paris. After France got captured by the Germans, the French Jews were being killed. The Muslim man offered every Jew he could find shelter in his mosque, and handed out fake Muslim certificates so they wouldn't be questioned. He saved over 400 lives. No one's your enemy except the ones you make yourself believe are. Cats will slow blink at you to give you kisses. The desert rain frog is a thing, and if you don't know what it is, go and look at it. It's amazing. If you're ever feeling lonely, remember, there are billions of cells in your body and all they care about is you. Most of them are bacteria. Well, they're still essential. No one is judging you. They're too busy worrying if they themselves are being judged. I'm judging you. I set aside a short period every afternoon and judge everyone for 45 minutes. My country is pushing for a series of laws that would make ecocide, the destruction of the ecosystem, a punishable crime. Since animals have evolved next to humans for thousands of years, they've learned to show their feelings towards us. Dogs will wag their tails, lick you, step on your feet and press their body against your legs and lie on you, all in an effort to show affection and be as close as physically possible to you. Cats make eye contact and slowly blink at you to say, "I am comfortable, I am pleased." They headbutt you as their form of a hug, and they groom you as they would a kitten to care for you. They rub their scent on you to say, "This is my human, all mine," and it reassures them of your bond. Cows will also groom you and enjoy being pet as it's relaxing and they truly trust you. Also, elephants get excited and happy looking at humans because we are to them as dogs are to us. They think we're cute and want to play and pet us. You will always have a second chance as long as you still want to get better. Rats are ticklish. You can tell whether a newborn baby is sick or not by looking at the color of the mother's milk. When a newborn baby is sick or has an infection of some kind, the mother's milk composition is altered so that it produces enough immune cells to fight off the infection. This occurs when cells are transmitted from the baby's saliva during breastfeeding. A mother's body is freaking amazing. Conversely, when a mother is sick or injured while pregnant, the fetus will send white blood cells and stem cells via the umbilical cord to help the mother fight off an infection and get better. Truly amazing. This is true. I was bitten by a deadly spider and my body was giving up. I was about to get the antivenom and transferred to major city hospital. Then they discovered I was pregnant and opted not to give me the antivenom due to risk factors. After about 2 weeks, I was fine. Our son is now 2. Everything for him was themed Spider-Man because of what happened. When the gas gauge first reads empty, you usually have 50 to 60 miles of fuel left. Autotech here. I do want to note that fuel is what lubricates and cools the fuel pump. Consistently running it below around a quarter tank will result in degradation of the fuel pump in the long term. If it's an emergency, it's okay. But for the sake of the pump and its bill to replace in the long term, I'd fill up around a quarter tank if you can. I've tried to hold off on the comments of naysayers in these facts, but it also feels like my job here is partially to educate as well as entertain. Take comfort in the fact that by topping off your gas in good time, you're staving off a maintenance job. It is estimated every 10 years the cells in your body will have been replaced with new ones. Therefore, you get a new body every 10 years, making it so you get a fresh start. There is another person in the world whose heartbeat is synced with yours. It helps me sleep at night. Despite the fact that the universe is roughly 13.8 billion years old, you managed to exist around the same time as Bob Ross and Mr. Rogers. It's in our innate nature to love and be connected. If only 1% of the world population likes you, that would still mean 70 million people liked you. The whole of Italy wants me? Spiders can't fly. Let's all take a moment and appreciate this fact. I hate to break it to you, but they can make paragliders with their webs. They can what? Toads can eat bread and toast. Nothing is permanent, so even if you have no hope, everything sucks, or if you've messed up, nothing is permanent. Food can be really yummy. When you sleep, your mind goes into peaceful rest for you to chill after a hard day's work. Kittens exist. No matter how bad things are, someone is going to come along on Ask Reddit and ask the opposite questions to a hugely popular question within a day or so. Don't feel bad next time you mess something up. Every single living thing is an accident. Evolution was just a series of some cell messing up. It's literally nature to make mistakes. Even the hottest people have smelly butt blasts. Many have even sharted. The vast majority of people are actually decent. Also, we don't need to find meaning. We literally created ourselves. Everything that matters, matters to someone. Everything that is beautiful in the eyes of someone. The universe does care. We're the part doing the caring. Almost everything on the internet stays, meaning hundreds of years in the future, we can look back on tweets from old celebrities and world leaders. Just imagine if we had social media 500 years ago. We could just look back at history happening. We have been born into arguably the best point in human history. It's true that we have a whole slew of troubles. These issues are only minor examples compared to the plagues, social Darwinism, and overall pretty crap quality of life that you'd live in, say, 100 years back. We still have those plagues and racial biases and hatred, but we're lucky that we're alive in a time where over the past century so many strives towards equality have been made. Except for black licorice. We're unfortunately still in that era. An average person living in the developed world today lives better than a Roman emperor. Think about it. We have the entirety of human knowledge in our pockets at all times. We can take hot baths whenever we want. Have fresh drinking water literally on tap in several rooms of our home. Toilets, TV, kitchen appliances. We can travel the globe in a day or two. We can order anything we want on our phones and have someone literally bring it to our door. Even just the level of access we have to things. If an emperor loves strawberries, but strawberries aren't in season, tough crap. No strawberries for Emperor Pouty. I can buy strawberries whenever I want. Julius Caesar would envy us. Also, you shut your filthy mouth. Licorice is delicious. What's the greatest? Fine, I'll do it myself. In history. Canadian soldier Leo Major and his friend Willie Arsenault were scouting a Dutch town called Zwolle that had been captured by Germans in World War II. On this scouting trip, the two had decided to liberate Zwolle together, but were spotted and Arsenault was brought down. Major, enraged, killed 2 German soldiers while the rest fled. On the outskirts of the town, Major intercepted a vehicle, disarming the soldiers there. He told a French-speaking German soldier that all the Canadian artillery would be firing on the town in the morning, and left him free to spread the rumor, even returning his weapon as a total alpha move. That night, Major decided to single-handedly liberate the town. Arming himself with many weapons, he made explosions and noise, making it sound like the entire Canadian army was there. Several times that night, Major went back and forth from Zwolle to the Canadian base, taking 8 to 10 German prisoners each time. At one point, Major located the enemy headquarters and raided it himself. He killed several officers and the rest fled. By morning, Major discovered that the Germans who had taken Zwolle had entirely retreated. I should also mention that Major was a sniper who only had one eye from a phosphorus grenade explosion years prior, and had remained in the military because he insisted he only needed one eye to aim his weapon, and that to him, he looked like a pirate. The Dutch town of Zwolle was liberated by a one-eyed sniper. He has several other legendary acts, but this to me was the best. Damn, I just did some more reading on this guy. He was also in the Normandy invasion on D-Day, and single-handedly captured an entire German vehicle that contained communication equipment and codes. After he lost his eye, but before this incident, this motherfricker single-handedly captured 100 German soldiers. He started with one, killed the soldier's friend, then used his prisoner to force that commanding officer to surrender. As he was leading a group of prisoners back to the Canadian front lines, the enemy spotted him and opened fire. Major gave 0 Fs and continued on his merry way, dropped the first group off, ordered a tank to go and kill his pursuers, then after they got killed, he personally marched the rest of his nearly 100 prisoners back to camp. Why? He was frozen and wet when he saw the first 2 soldiers and wanted them to pay. A general tried to give him the Distinguished Conduct Medal for this, and Major refused because said general was incompetent and in no position to be giving medals. Shortly after, he survived a landmine, and guys, this was still before Zwolle. As if his massive balls weren't big enough already, after World War II he returned to fight in the Korean War and received another Distinguished Conduct Medal. While the Canadian forces were trying to capture a hill that the Chinese were currently defending, Major led 18 men as an elite sniper and scout force to a hill in the middle of the Chinese forces and opened fire. His team were able to take the hill. A couple of hours later, 14,000 Chinese reinforcements returned to take back the hill. Major refused, found cover for his men, and was able to hold back the Chinese throughout the night. I vote Major for baddest Canadian by a landslide. Folks, I understand this might be internet heresy, but is Major more of a real-life baddie than fictional Chuck Norris? Because I know that Chuck Norris can push planet Earth down while training, but he didn't do any of this stuff. Let's not forget that Isaac Newton ran out of math to work with and was like, I guess I'll just invent calculus then. He was self-quarantined during the plague as well. Otis invented pretty much what we consider the modern elevator. Nobody was convinced it was safe, so he hoisted himself up extremely high and had somebody cut the cable with an axe to prove how confident he was that the elevator was safe regardless of almost worst-case scenarios. The safety locking mechanism kicked in and the elevator stopped after only a few inches. He survived. Had it failed there at the New York's World Fair, we probably wouldn't have elevators today. In 1888, Alman Brown Strauger, an undertaker, noticed he was losing a lot of business to the other undertaker in town. He found out that the other undertaker's wife was a telephone operator, and when she intercepted people asking to be connected to Strauger's funeral home, the operator would route the call to her husband's funeral home instead. 3 years later, Strauger patented the automatic teller exchange, a system which allowed telephone users to make calls without the need for human operators, single-handedly destroying an entire workforce. Imagine being so teed off that you don't just get someone fired, but remove their job from existence entirely. Cliff Stoll, of the Cuckoo's Egg fame, noticed weird traffic on his university servers. No one believed him that there was any risk occurring. Ended up uncovering a major hacking attempt to steal missile designs and basically created internet security. John Snow. Not that one, the father of epidemiology. No one believed him that the cholera outbreak in what is now Soho was because of a contaminated water pump. He broke it. They arrested him for vandalism and held him until the outbreak suddenly ended. He was also a pioneer when it came to anesthetics. Queen Victoria permitted him to put her under for the birth of her 2 children. I visited his memorial in Brompton Cemetery a few years ago. He's right around the corner from Emmeline Pankhurst's grave. Both sites had fresh flowers on them. Donald Knuth is one of the big names in computer science. Back in the 1960s, he set out to write the definitive texts on computer programming and analysis of algorithms. The first 3 volumes came out, and he started the 4th in the early to mid-1970s. He was unhappy with how the newer printing editions were typeset, and so he took a summer to solve that problem. A decade later, the 4th volume had still not been completed. But as a consolation prize, we got TEX, later extended to the more commonly used LATEX, without question the most comprehensive and powerful language for creating documents with heavy technical requirements. It's a strange mix of a markup language like HTML and a compiled language like C. It's completely free and has been for well over 30 years, and is probably the most bug-free piece of software I've ever seen. Certainly for its size and scope, there's not much out there of comparable quality. There is literally no mathematics that cannot be properly typeset in TEX or LATEX. Its default style is instantly recognizable to any working mathematician. It's used across nearly all STEM fields, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of journals that only accept manuscripts written in LATX. It wasn't until the early 2000s that drafts of the 4th volume started to appear. Nobody has seemed to mind. Probably the time that Nando Parrado and Robert Canessa decided that they couldn't wait any longer and legged it for 10 days across the Andes with no warm clothes, climbing gear, or food, except some scraps of their dead friends stuffed into a sock. They literally found someone out in the middle of nowhere, Sergio Catalan, who rode horseback all night and then took a bus to get some help. The mountain climbers had come from the wreckage of a crashed plane that everyone had been looking for over 2 months. They needed help for the other survivors who were injured and starving. They saved 14 of their friends. There's a book written about it by one of the survivors himself. Miracle in the Andes, 72 Days on the Mountain, and My Long Trek Home by Nando Parrado. I never watched the movie, but the book still gets me to this day. It's one of the most disturbing depictions of humans' ability to survive even under the deadliest circumstances. A really humbling read, reminding most of us of our own fragility and how terrible and fleeting everything truly is. It's gotta be Aimo Koivunen. He was a Finnish soldier in the Second World War when the Finns were trying to reclaim land from the Soviets. He got separated from his unit mid-war in the middle of nowhere. He was the one tasked to carry the narcotics they held in case of injury or tiredness, one of which was Pervitin, which was basically crystal in tablet form. Instead of just taking 1 or 2, he downed the whole bottle and went on a weeks-long juiced-up rampage. He got hit by a landmine, evaded Soviet soldiers, caught a bird and ate it raw, all while on skis. He finally made it back to Finnish lines where, on arrival, he weighed only 90 pounds or so and had a heart rate of 200 beats per minute. He ended up living for another 45 years. There is one thing the rest of Northern Europe has learned: you do not mess with the Finns. Yes, they have a funny-sounding language. Those people beat tanks. On skis. Stay the frick out of Finland. Brian Acton interviewed at Facebook and got turned down. He said F it and built WhatsApp. Several years later, Facebook bought WhatsApp for $19 billion. Morris Hilleman invented over 40 vaccines during his career in the pharmaceutical industry. In 1963, his oldest daughter caught the mumps. He cultured a sample from her, developed a vaccine, and injected it into his younger daughter. That vaccine is still in use and has saved millions of lives. In total, it's estimated that his work has saved 118 million lives globally. The guy who started FedEx wrote a college paper about a nationwide overnight shipping company and got a C. Started the company anyway. Later, after he started it and it was struggling, he couldn't get a loan and the company was almost bankrupt, and he bet next week's payroll at the casino on roulette and won. Also got a silver star in the Vietnam War and now co-owns the Washington Redskins. The latter often viewed as the biggest failure in his life. The giant Norse axeman who held the choke point at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. By the time the bulk of the English army had arrived, the Vikings on the west side were either slain or fleeing across the bridge. The English advance was then delayed by the need to pass through the choke point presented by the bridge itself. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle has it that a single giant Norse axeman, possibly armed with a Dane axe, blocked the narrow crossing and single-handedly held up the entire English army. The story is that this axeman cut down 40 Englishmen and was defeated only when a single English soldier floated under the bridge in a half-barrel and thrust his spear through the planks, mortally wounding the axeman. I'm surprised no one's mentioned Catherine the Great of Russia. She decided her husband was useless, which granted he was, and proceeded to set up a military coup to overthrow him. Even with the plan being discovered early, she dressed herself in military garb and marched with her new army, which had just sworn loyalty to her, down to Peter's palace, where he was forced to resign the throne, all without a single drop of blood shed. At least until Peter turned up dead sometime later under shady circumstances, but honestly, for a military coup, it was pretty non-violent. If saying, "F it, I'm ruling Russia myself," isn't great, I don't know what is. I mean, it's right there next to her name for a reason. It's incredible, especially considering A, she's a lady, and B, she wasn't Russian. C, she originally wasn't Russian Orthodox. Not a very old story. Manji, or the Mountain Man, lived in a very remote village of India, whose route to nearby was blocked by a mountain, and hence villagers had to climb it every time, and they had to do that daily to get essential supplies. During one of these trips, his wife fell down the mountain. He loved her a lot. He tried to persuade the government to do a mountain tunnel project there, but to no avail. So he went on alone to break the entire mountain with just an axe. He did that for 10+ years and finally succeeded. There's a Bollywood movie on him too, titled Manji, the Mountain Man. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Desmond Doss, single-handedly saved from 50 to 100 men up on Hacksaw Ridge in Okinawa. His company was ordered to retreat when they were attacked by the Japanese, but instead he said, "Nah," stayed up on the ridge alone and unarmed, and dragged as many soldiers as he could to safety without any help. Even when he was shot by a sniper and riddled with shrapnel, he made sure they took another guy down the hillside before him. And yes, I'm aware there's a movie, I've read about him before that, and I know he's done more than just what's in the movie. I just didn't want to make a 3,000-word post about the many ways this guy is amazing. Australian stretcher bearer Leslie Allen did a similar thing on Mount Tambu. Carried out 12 men one at a time on his back alone. Received a silver star. James Clerk Maxwell was idolized by Einstein as being the father of modern physics. Not only did he formulate the classical theory of electromagnetic radiation, but just for craps and giggles, he calculated exactly what Saturn's rings were made of from using pure mathematics. It wasn't until Voyager 1 and 2 passed by and took photos in the early 80s that we got a confirmation that Maxwell was right. He then calculated how to take a color photograph back in 1855. This was then achieved in 1861 and is recognized as the first ever color photograph. In 1947, a guy named Thor Heyerdahl was trying to prove his theory that the Polynesian islands were settled by people from South America, not Asia. Nobody believed him because it was thought that crossing such a large ocean with the technology they had back then was impossible. So he decides to build a boat using only the tools and materials available at the time these migrations took place. And then he sailed the boat across the Pacific Ocean, nearly dying in the process, but ultimately making it to the Polynesian islands. Thor Heyerdahl was a bit of a madman. He also tried to prove that the ancient Egyptians could have crossed the Atlantic Ocean by rebuilding one of their boats and, well, sailing across. It took 2 tries, but they did it. It's still pretty unlikely that the Egyptians actually did sail across the Atlantic, but it's neat to know that they could have. Yes, and it's important to note that the prevailing theory is that even though Americans could have settled the Pacific Islands, it's more overwhelmingly likely that it was people from Asia. So, amazing feats of strength and endurance, Thor. Very impressive on both counts. You're still probably wrong though, mate. Juan Pujol Garcia was a Spaniard who created his own counterintelligence operation for the Allies during World War II. Initially, he approached the British and American intelligence to offer them his services, but both countries rebuffed him. Undeterred, Garcia created a fictional persona as a pro-fascist Spanish official and got himself recruited by the Third Reich, who directed him to travel to Britain to recruit agents. Instead, Garcia created a network of fictitious agents and sub-agents using publicly available information, like newspapers and travel brochures. It was at this point that he again contacted Allied intelligence and was finally recruited. Garcia continued his work throughout the war, and for the same operation he received both a knighthood from the British and the Iron Cross from Germany. The Germans never realized that he was a double agent. Yes, in the lead-up to Overlord, he confirmed reports that the Allied attack would come from Dover and wouldn't attack Normandy. Then, at the last moment, he confirmed that the Allies in fact would attack Normandy. But it was too late for the Germans to act on it. So afterwards, the Germans still trusted him, as they would point to him and say, "He was the only one who predicted the Normandy invasion. It was technical issues, as always, that meant that the data got to us late." How about the doctor stationed in Antarctica that removed his own appendix? Gosh darn. When Nintendo turned down a collaboration with Sony, then Sony said, "Frick it, we'll do it ourselves." And the rest is history. To be fair, I think it's great that they did. Nintendo and Sony are so different, and there's plenty of room for both. Nintendo occupies a niche that I don't think they'll ever lose. Sony and Microsoft are locked in a never-ending war, yet Nintendo will always have their niche. Doesn't matter who wins the console war, Nintendo will claim second place. The first thing that comes to thought here is the Louisiana Purchase. Congress planned on buying a small piece of the available land, but Jefferson used some interpretation messery to double the size of the US without congressional approval. When Julius Caesar decided to just up and fricking march into Rome to declare himself the military leader. Or how about his Rhine bridges that he built in a few days to cross an army over a river, then went back over and demolished it just because his army could. It's said that the Germanic tribes saw his army do this and basically crapped themselves. Imagine being in some nomadic tribe and an invading force comes to a river, builds an entire bridge, crosses it, craps in your land, and then goes back home and destroys the entire bridge all in less than a week. Henry VIII couldn't get his way with the Pope, so he made the Church of England so that he could do what he wanted. This man legit made his own damn religion, which millions still follow today, just so he could get rid of his wife. A man who was a tractor mechanic company owner made a good chunk of money and bought a Ferrari. He thought that the car wasn't as good as it could be, and it wasn't very comfortable, so he brought his own complaints all the way to Enzo Ferrari, the owner of the company. Enzo insulted the man, saying that a mere tractor mechanic didn't know how to make a good sports car. That sparked a rivalry that lasts to this day. That man was Ferruccio Lamborghini. During the American Revolution, John Paul Jones sailed over to England to burn down British naval ships. He succeeded, of course, and made it back safely. After the revolution, he was even pardoned by the town that he burned most of the ships in. The guy in the war with wounded fingers, a doctor wouldn't amputate them, so he bit them off himself. My great-grandpa did the opposite. They were going to amputate his feet in World War II, and he said, nah. So he went AWOL and treated his own wounded feet on his own. When he came back with 2 perfectly good feet, he basically said, I wanted to keep my feet and I wanted to keep fighting. And as far as I know, he didn't get any kind of punishment, even though he was gone for weeks. I imagine they would have sent him back home if they'd amputated his feet, so hard to call him a deserter for running off, especially if he came back to fight. Leonid Rogozov removing his own appendix, or Inez Ramirez Perez for doing her own C-section. Rogozov was a good doctor, and Perez was a poor Mexican woman. The guy who made body armor and shot himself to test it. I mean, I'd use a test dummy for the first few times myself. Judging by the guy's decisions, I would call him a test dummy. Metallica fired Dave Mustaine in 1983 because he was sort of a control freak and wanted to take the band in a more prog or jazz metal direction. He was also way overdoing it with substances and was known for violent behavior at the time. He went off and created his own band Megadeth, and over the next 30+ years he'd sold millions of albums and toured the whole world writing and controlling pretty much everything he had ever wanted. It seems they've now patched all the things up. The guy's an absolute genius and beast of a guitarist and songwriter. Even as a guy who knows nothing about the heavier music, that is amazing. The author has a runner-up story attached to the coattails of this absolute legend. Also, when guitarist Hillel Slovak died in 1988, John Frusciante was a 19-year-old kid and a huge fan of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. He was heartbroken and didn't want to see the end of his favorite band, so he went and auditioned to play the lead guitar. He got the gig, helped take them to the top of the charts. The rest is history, and today he's considered one of the greatest rock guitarists out there. Martine Rothblatt, founder of SiriusXM and an unbelievable polymath, was told her daughter Genesis had 3 months to live. She had been diagnosed with a type of pulmonary arterial hypertension which was fatal. The disease causes too much pressure in the blood vessels leading from the heart to the lungs, causing them to narrow and not carry enough oxygen. So Rothblatt quit all of her other work and went to the library to save her daughter. Even though she had zero background in the field, she figured out a cure and in the process founded United Therapeutics, which is a billion-dollar biotechnology company. Rothblatt's life story is amazing. Marie Curie, a Polish and French chemist and a physicist who, without going into great detail, died of constant exposure to radiation while seeking a cure for others, more or less sacrificing herself as a human guinea pig, knowing full well the consequences of her actions. Here in Scotland, we have many Marie Curie charity shops who provide funds for hospices and the like. I'm pretty sure she's responsible for saving my butt and many countless others for her pioneering works. Was quoted in 1912 as saying, "F it, I'll do it myself." Possibly paraphrased. Clara Lemlich taking the stage at a union meeting in 1909 to declare a general strike after the older male union leaders told the working girls that there wasn't really a point in striking and it would be too hard, just be patient and deal with it. So 20-year-old Clara interrupts them, climbs up on the stage and shouts at the crowd, "I have listened to all the speeches and I have no further patience for talk. I too have worked and suffered and I am tired of talk. I move that we go on general strike. Now." And everyone went for it, instant agreement from the workers. The Soviet woman who lost her husband in World War II to the Germans, who sold everything to pay for a tank with the request that she got to drive it to fight them. Go and read up about Maria Oktyabrskaya on Wikipedia. Sir Ranulph Fiennes, after an expedition, I think to the Arctic, had frostbitten digits on one hand. After becoming irritated and uncomfortable waiting for the doctors to sort out treatment, he went to his garden shed and amputated them himself. George Clooney bought his own spy satellite to prove the alleged crimes of an African warlord because nobody else would. The kicker is that he's using all of his earnings from shilling Nespresso to do it. Also, I thought he was buying time on it and didn't outright purchase the satellite. Here's a notable mention, albeit somewhat obscure. Sam Regenstrife once made 40% of the dishwashers in the USA at the time. He fell ill with a kidney stone and went to his local hospital in Indiana. Upon leaving, he was disgusted by the waiting times and quality of care. He took matters into his own hands and created a hospital and founded the Regenstrife Institute. This institute helped map the genome of COVID-19 and translated its findings into 20+ languages, helping the world fight this virus. Henry Ford proposed to buy Ferrari so that Ford could be competitive in the performance car market. The deal was about to be signed, but Enzo only wanted to sell the commercial Ferrari division and not the racing arm. So Henry Ford said F it, and thus was born the Ford GT40. Enzo is pretty much the reason 2 other sports car companies exist. Leroy Jenkins! Oh my god, he just ran in. Stick to the plan. God damn it, Leroy! What's the most WTF thing you've seen go down in front of you? I was a kid, say around 7 maybe. My father and I were at the bank and he goes inside to do something and I stayed in the car. The driver's side door opens and this guy just gets in the car and looks down at the key. He finally turns and notices me, smiles and says, "Oh, sorry, wrong car." I then see him get into a completely different style and color car a few spaces down and drive away. As a kid, that scared the ever-loving crap out of me. Growing up, I worked on a passenger ferry to a town beach. One day we were on a layover between boats, sitting on the dock, eating lunch. It's quiet and there were ducks swimming by, really nice sunny day. All of a sudden, a swan swoops in from gosh knows where and literally lands on top of one of the ducks, forcing it under the water. The swan is literally sitting on this duck as the duck struggles to get free. After a while, the struggling stops. The duck the swan landed on does not come back up to the surface. In conclusion, I watched a swan drown a duck in cold blood. 2 heavily pregnant women fighting, like seriously fighting. I'm talking fists, kicks, scratching, hair pulling. Everyone wanted to break it up, but nobody wanted to get in the middle of it. Maybe the babies inside of them were enemies in the past life and decided to continue their battle using their new mothers as flesh mecha Gundams. Driving home from work one night on the freeway, I look out of my window to see a yellow motorcycle zip past me, on its side trailing sparks. The driver had fallen off and was rolling past my car. As I watch him thinking, oh crap, he fell off, I hope he's okay, a black four-door sedan rolls right over the top of the guy. And that was the first time I ever had to call 911. One day at college during the spring semester, birds started falling out of the trees. Most couldn't fly, some were dead, and others were unconscious and kind of twitchy. Really freaked everyone out. Biology department investigated, and they determined that a series of flash freezes kick-started the fermentation process of the new spring berries on the trees, and the birds were getting completely wasted. All I can say is, lucky birds. I can tell you, I would have saved several thousands in my life by now if I could get lit that cheaply. More stories of blotto animals followed. There was some zoo I visited in Florida where the mulberry trees dropped a bunch of overripe berries and the monkeys in the enclosure ate tons of them and got drunk as all heck. I've seen squirrels do this with walnut trees. The husk around the nut ferments, yard full of drunk squirrels. It was pretty cute actually. My aunt turned her barn into a nice little place to throw parties. Full bar and everything. One night a bunch of raccoons got in and managed to get into a bottle of whiskey and some beers. They got pretty hammered and went on a pigeon-killing rampage. Isn't nature amazing? Saw two people doing the deed against the wall of the main train station wall at 6:30 p.m. on a Friday night. The cops pulled the guy out of her 5 minutes after I showed up. So, my takeaway is that you were watching for at least 5 minutes. Maybe they hired those cops to be the contraception. Coptraception. Mine's a very gruesome what the frick. One time back when I was a student, I was waiting for my train home to leave, and as there were several minutes left, I was enjoying a sandwich outside on the platform. On the other side of the platform stood another train and a young couple, saying goodbyes and kissing, and the man still stood in the door as the train started to leave. I took a bite out of my sandwich. The man gave his girlfriend a last kiss and swung the door shut as he was jumping off. A piece of his jacket, or perhaps trousers, got caught up and he fell to the platform, got dragged under the train and promptly crushed in a gruesome fashion, with blood and other tissue spraying everywhere as his girlfriend stood and watched, paralyzed in absolute horror. People in the train were banging on the windows and screaming for it to stop. People on the platform were in absolute panic and some of them had bits of the unfortunate guy on them. And I stood there with a half-chewed bite of my sandwich in my mouth and my jaws wide open in astonishment. I don't think I will ever again see something as disturbing in my life happening so innocuously and within a few heartbeats, or chews. My husband and I were in a mall in Bethesda, Maryland when we passed a Tyson chicken kiosk where Mary Lou Retton was demonstrating how awesome Tyson chicken is. We watched for a moment and then walked on toward the mall exit. A short way down the mall, we see a young woman escorting a person in a chicken costume towards the kiosk. The chicken appears to be splattered with blood-red paint and they're carrying a bucket. They pass us and we stop. Did you see… Was that a chicken? Not wanting to miss what was sure to be a spectacle, we turned around and followed the chick and her chicken friend to the Tyson chicken stage. The chicken-costumed man runs towards the stage and tosses red liquid at Mary Lou Retton, who despite her Olympian status is unable to avoid it entirely. Security guards immediately rush the chicken and grab him, while the woman screams about how Tyson murders chickens. As security drags the couple away, we hear the young woman shouting, "Stop choking the chicken! Stop choking the chicken!" I still can't believe that happened. This happened in Ireland. That's Limerick City. We'd closed up the restaurant for the night and were cleaning it up. Two women began knocking on the doors, asking us to let them in. They looked pretty distressed, so we let them in. They'd been attacked on the street. We sat them down and rang the Gardaí. It was then we noticed the blood. One of the women had multiple puncture wounds on her back. She didn't even realize. They just felt the blow and assumed it was just punches, but whoever attacked them had stabbed them with a screwdriver or something. They were pretty upset, but were remarkably calm considering they were full of holes. Pretty what the frick moment for us in the restaurant. Shock and adrenaline can help you cope with anything, it seems. The EMTs arrived and took them to the hospital. Another time, same restaurant, late night after the nightclub crowd, drunk students. A guy in the queue dropped money, bent down to pick it up, and stumbled into another guy. The guy who got bumped turned and bent down, clamped his teeth around the stumbler's ear, and tore it off. Spat it out and nonchalantly ordered his food. We put the ear on ice and called the ambulance. The paramedics lost the ear en route, and the poor guy never got it reattached. Well, my life is pretty mundane, but here goes nothing. When I was in middle school, my family still had a big old box TV. In fact, its stand was an even bigger broken TV that was built into a wood frame and swiveled. So one day, I had an open soda on top of the working TV and accidentally moved the swivel, thus knocking the soda off it. It did a full flip and landed right side up. Not a drop spilled. I proceeded to run outside and scream like a maniac. Probably the highlight of my life. I dropped a McDonald's drink once and it landed right on its lid and pushed the straw inside it and didn't spill. Did that right in school and had one kid see it. Why have none of my many beverages that I've spilled in my long lifetime ever done this? Perhaps I'm due for a few non-spill drops in my near future. I worked at a public shooting range for a number of years. One day back in 2009, me and a few of the employees were unloading the rental pieces from the safe to be put out on the firing line. The guy in front of me pulled out an Uzi and an SKS, both semi-auto, and he broke the #1 rule of weapon safety and had them both pointed up towards him. Long story short, he dropped the SKS and the bolt went into the trigger guard of the Uzi, which had the grip safety disabled, which was inexplicably loaded as well. It shot through his thumb, which was over the barrel, and right through his head. He fell to the floor, but didn't die until the helicopter ride on the way to the hospital. I just don't get when people take weapon safety so casually. It's one rule, but gosh darn it, so many people can't follow it. I once saw a woman shoot herself in the stomach at a public range. Rather, I saw the blood trail, because after this woman shot herself, she calmly packed up, got in her car, and drove the frick away. All while bleeding out of her stomach and without anybody noticing. Saw it all on the tapes later. How she wasn't freaking the frick out, I will never understand. I once witnessed a Mexican standoff in a crowded parking lot. Did anyone end up firing, or was it a cliffhanger where you had to wait until the next episode? They ended up yelling at each other for a few minutes and then leaving. Anticlimactic, but it was the best outcome. There's this older woman who goes to the same gym as I do, probably early 60s with bright blue pigtails. The only thing she does at the gym is stand in the middle of the weight room eating a papaya like a chipmunk every single day. This has been going on for years. Hey, she took the first step. One of these days she's going to work out. In my middle school, a fight broke out between two girls. One of the girls yanked on the other girl's hair so hard a patch of it came off and you could visibly see some blood leaking out of that area. That scream was something I'll never forget. When I was 12, my whole street was running garage sales on a Saturday morning. Towards one end, there were two sales next to each other and one across the street. Everyone was out and about, including myself. I was surveying my spending options when out flies a deer from behind two houses, darts across the street and jumps right through the family room window of the house in the corner lot, shattered glass and all. From within the house, I could see the deer bucking wildly and spattering blood all over the white-painted walls. The father commando rushes in and after 17 seconds of chaos, yelling and screaming, the deer struggles back out of the window and limps away, bleeding a trail behind it. The commando dad slowly comes back out of the front door carrying his 6-year-old girl. She's pale white from shock and has her father's neck in a vice grip. She was the one screaming. The deer was later found dead 4 blocks away. It's super vanilla, but one time I drove by a topless, obese man taking a kitten out of a mailbox. That was like 5 years ago, and I still wonder about the context. Haha, finally, I got some tail. Just a few days ago, dolphins in the river. I thought I'd gone crazy, but then I saw them 5 more times in the next 30 minutes. I'm still searching in the web whether it's possible. Is it? River dolphins are a thing, man. Google them. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I saw an ambulance hit a person riding a motorcycle. Don't know if that made it lucky or unlucky for the motorcyclist. I was in my car turning around to get into a parking space when I see that the space I wanted was occupied by a woman sitting on the curb taking a dump. Needless to say, I parked elsewhere. Was walking in central London to university about 6 years ago. Just me and 2 guys ahead on their bikes on the pavement chatting. They looked real normal. A city police van drives past me and stops at the traffic light. Suddenly, about 5 officers burst out of the back with SMGs, a rare sight in the UK, and grab these 2 guys, guns in their faces, and drag them into the vans. Sirens on, and off they go. Biggest what the frick is why I didn't take the 2 free bikes. Taking the vehicles of 2 wanted suspects that may or may not have had substances stashed in them for all you know might not have been your best move in the long term. Best leave them be or take them to the station yourself. A similar thing happened to me. I was driving to my parents in a suburban area and I stopped at a four-way stop. Another car at the stop sign to the right of me stopped first. I was waiting for him to go. Suddenly, 3 cars box this one car in against the curb and 4 undercover cops get out. They pull the guy out of the car, bend him over the hood of his car, cuff him, and throw him into the back of an unmarked police car. Then I guess they were calling for backup and tow trucks, since they had their lights going and were standing on their walkie-talkies. I just sat at the four-way stop, jaw hanging open until everything settled down. Then I just continued on my way. I think back to that and wonder if it actually happened sometimes. My first day in Seattle, way back in the summer of '99, I saw a hipster on Capitol Hill in unzipped skinny jeans walking his dog with the leash handle around his frankenbeans. Welcome to Seattle, where you can see at least one seriously what the frick moment every single day without even trying. I saw a lady I refer to as the Bird Lady in the metro station in Shanghai, China. She was putting sausage into her mouth, chewing it up so it was in small pieces and salivary, and then spitting it back into the waiting mouth of her granddaughter who had her mouth open and waiting like a little bird. It was gross, and I still remember it 4 years later. Riding the train on my way home from work one Friday night, and a small group of college students comes on, clearly already pre-gaming at like 6 p.m. They're talking and being loud, and I notice that one of the girls has some stuff leaking out of the little drawstring bag she's bringing with her. I think to myself, damn, that's gonna suck when she finds out. Not a moment later, she turns to her friends and says, "Hey guys, I just peed, ha!" And without missing a beat, they all just laugh and one guy goes, "Oh, Brittany," and they all just get off the train as the doors open, still laughing and being kids, while the rest of us commuters are just staring dumbfounded at this puddle of pee on the floor now. A monkey once jumped onto my lap. I was in a car in Asia and stretched out its hand. I gave it $1 and it ran away and gave it to its master, who was waiting nearby. What are they gonna do? Arrest a monkey? It's genius. Walking through a forest path at my university, I saw 2 crows taking on a snake. I watched for like 5 minutes as the birds were trying to peck at the snake and the snake was picking which bird to lunge at. It seemed like the birds were going for the snake's eyes. It felt like that scene in Chamber of Secrets where Fawkes takes out the basilisk. A drive-by on a neighbor's house, in the middle of the day, in apartments, while we had a party and a bouncy house out front full of kids. A few months ago, I was driving on the motorway and a car pulled over into the hard shoulder ahead of me. The passengers jumped out and literally a few seconds later, it just exploded, like Michael Bay level exploded. Luckily, the passengers were just far away not to be harmed. I was with a friend passing by a bar terrace when one guy stepped in front of us, dropped down onto his knee and proposed to me. He actually had an engagement ring and held out his hand. His friends kind of gathered around and cheered on. I just laughed and walked around him, forgot to say I was 16 or 17 at the time and the guy was in his mid-20s. Be sure to carry around a positive pregnancy test for the next time this happens, so you can pull it out and tell him you dreamed this would happen because your little family will soon be 3. Last summer, some friends and I decided to go and drop acid down at a lake near where we lived. We found a comfortable private spot to set up camp and began our trip. About 3 to 4 hours in, we start swimming around, tripping our balls off as we play in the water and watch the clouds go crazy. Then, we hear some noises and look over to see a fat, shirtless redneck in jean shorts and his wrinkly, way too tan wife steering a small boat towards the shore near us. We start to get a little worried as they get nearer and nearer, not sure how we're going to play it cool with them being that close to us. Then all of a sudden we see a little wiener dog hop off the boat, followed by another and another, until eventually there are 7 little wiener dogs running around the shore right in front of us. After what was probably 30 minutes to an hour, the man whistled and they all ran back to the boat and hopped in, sailing into the sunset never to be seen again. It was a very strange occurrence and I wouldn't have trusted my own eyes if my friends hadn't seen it as well. Sitting at a cafeteria late at night in my shady neighborhood. A BMW drives up the parking lot and a man gets out and walks away. BMWs are not something you leave unattended here, so it was already a bit weird, but whatever, I have food. A few minutes later, another guy walks up to the car looking around suspiciously. He grabs the frickin' keys from behind the front wheel somewhere, gets in and drives off. I have no idea what kind of deal this was, but if you get a frickin' BMW for free with it, then I ain't seen nothing. So if whatever you're selling comes with a $40,000 luxury sedan, are you dealing in multi-million-dollar munitions chips, or were there just 2 Stormy Daniels in the back seat? At my university, I watched an eagle, which aren't common in my area, swoop down and kill a squirrel early in the morning. It was at LSU and it was a bald eagle. As for the squirrel, I have no idea. A typical brown squirrel, I suppose. It was pretty brutal, but the squirrel was instantly lifeless as soon as the eagle made contact, so at least it wasn't made to suffer. My friend nearly shot me in the face when I was 15. I showed him my brother's SIG 9mm with hollow point bullets, then took the clip out and handed it to my friend. He proceeded to point-blank aim the weapon at me and pull the trigger. With one in the chamber, it literally put a small cut in the shoulder of my shirt. "What the frick, man? Why is there one in the chamber?" "What the frick, man? It's a piece. Don't point and shoot unless you plan to kill." "What the frick myself, not checking the chamber. You know your brother's an idiot." I was driving through town one evening and I stopped at a stop sign. I looked out my window and see a kid 10 years old or so dressed up like a banana. We make eye contact and he starts dancing. What the frick?
Did you check your watch to see if it was peanut butter jelly time?
I was on vacation this past year in the Dominican Republic and for some reason our rental had issues. When turning the car on, the alarm would go off and not shut off. Eventually, we learned to deal with it and just drive until it shut off. So one day we're driving with the alarm on and one of their army men pulled us over. We anticipated him coming up to say something about the alarm. Instead, he starts chasing down a Haitian selling fruit. The Haitian tries to run and the army man shoots him with his M16. I crapped myself at that moment. I saw a seagull eating another dead seagull in a Sears parking lot. It happened when I was 12. On my way home, a strange guy, probably 16 or 17, appeared in front of me. I was scared as frick because he looked very brutal. He then came directly towards me and kissed my cheek, followed by the words, "God loves you," and then proceeded to run away, laughing like crazy. I nearly crapped my pants, but it was worth it. I was at a party with some mates, and of course beer pong starts going down. Now, one of my mates was so wasted out of his mind that he could barely stand up, let alone get anything in. Adding to this, he was the worst at any sport you could think of. But somehow, in his inebriated state, he was getting every single ping pong ball in all the cups. He must have had an 80% accuracy rate or something ridiculous. He remembers none of it.
He was so drunk he forgot he was crap at sports.
I don't know if it's the most what the frick thing, but it did just happen. I was driving along and saw a car ram into the back of a black SUV. The SUV pulls over and the car stops. 3 angry, obese Asian men jump out of the SUV carrying tire irons and a baseball bat, and literally jump on the car, battering the crap out of it, breaking the windshield, etc. One of them breaks the passenger's window and tries to drag the driver out. The driver backs up at speed, fat Asians tumbling everywhere. Puts it into drive to ram the car again. Fat Asians are running into the SUV now, while the car dude backs up, rams them, backs up and rams them again. Fat Asian SUV speeds away, weaving through traffic, followed by broken windshield, jacked up sedan guy, music still blasting from the speakers. In Philly back in the 80s, going into the Spectrum to see the Sixers play the Knicks, guy got stabbed in the chest about 20 feet in front of us. He fell to the side with his blade sticking out of his chest next to the turnstile. People passed by him like it was nothing. I was walking in St. Petersburg, Russia, while studying abroad. We were in a shopping or residential area off Nevsky Prospect when a police car shows up. Now, this wasn't an area where cars normally went, so it was strange. Then 4 guys got out of the car, opened the trunk, and put on FSB bulletproof vests and small arms. They looked like SMGs, but I wasn't close enough to tell. They then proceeded to walk into an apartment building. I told our group we had to get the frick out of there. What was your most serious,
Thank God I double-checked,
moment? Looking through papers to shred, I opened an envelope and inside was a $2,500 check. It was a refund from when we refinanced our mortgage. Things like that is why checks are such an outdated concept. Why couldn't they deposit it directly into your bank account? I think they'd certainly be happy had the check been shredded. Student pilot 8 years ago. Got fuel in a high-wing training airplane. The instructor was ready to go. I'd done the pre-flight before the fuel truck arrived. You can't see the fuel caps from the ground. I was about to start the engine, but got out, hopped up on the step, and found both caps loose. You always do your whole pre-flight yourself. No excuses. Someone could have just landed and delivered it to you fully fueled. Run the whole check anyway. Fly to another airport and park it for lunch. Full pre-flight before you head home. Full checklist every time. Not a pilot, great-grandfather was. He imparted wisdom on my grandmother who shared it with me when I expressed interest on getting flying lessons. Everyone on the runway is a frickin' idiot. You can never be too sure someone didn't mess with your plane. Check it out, then check it again. 'Cause a car crash might not kill you, but a plane crash will. Was paying my mortgages online and almost added an extra digit to my payment amount. That would have sucked so bad because it could have wiped my checking account out. My dad transferred $40,000 to his mortgage instead of his savings. He's still trying to get it back.
He'll lose interest eventually?
Almost submitted a test paper without my name on it. Almost forgot my room keys before a 6-hour drive back to my university. I think this applies. So summer 2010, my family is having the inside of the house painted. Hot as all hell, so my parents leave the upstairs windows open day and night to let out the paint smell and help it dry with the hot air. I really don't like this. I'm a naturally paranoid person. This went on for several weeks. We have a pretty big house. One day before I leave school, I decided to go upstairs and shut the window and lock it. They can yell at me later if they want. When I came home that afternoon, the painter told me, "Hey, that big ladder you have on the side of the house was getting in the way, so I moved it. Hope that's okay." I responded, "We don't have a big ladder." Apparently someone came up to the house and set up a ladder to get through the open window, but I'd closed it just by chance that day. I guess they saw our painter coming and they ditched it and split, sans ladder. Oddly enough, my parents kept opening the window at night and during the day after all that crap. Yes, we came up on a free ladder, but I'm scared of heights. Gotta say, those robbers don't seem like the most committed types, or maybe they're just smarter than me and they know when to cut and run.
Answering exams and I finished early. Double-checked when the teacher reminded us that there were only 5 minutes left and saw that I hadn't answered the whole backside of a page. Luckily, it was multiple choice though.
Oh my god, this happened to me in high school. I stayed up all night studying for a difficult history test, finished pretty early and felt like I did decently well on it. Went to my teacher's office later in the day to ask a question and she casually mentioned the backside of the test. Me? There was a backside? Teacher? Oh god, you didn't know? No. At this point, I just broke down and started crying in her office. I couldn't believe I was going to fail the exam I'd stayed up all night for because I was too much of an exhausted idiot to turn the damn page over. Luckily, she took pity on me and let me do the reverse side of the test right then and there in her office. I'm still so grateful that she was so kind. Many other teachers would have said, "TS," and let me fail. I was at a four-way intersection at night when my light turned green. I was the only car on the road and in a hurry, but something in me felt like I needed to look left before I went. Right after I turned my head to look, a car without any headlights on ran the red light, doing probably 50 miles per hour. Had I just immediately gone instead of glancing left, I would have been T-boned and probably killed. Listen to your gut, people. Reminds me of the one time my friend and I were going back to his place. We'd stopped at the lights and he was right behind me, and the light turned green. Well, I looked before going, because that's a good idea, and at night as well. Saw a guy coming down the street, at least they had their lights on, and just sat because I knew they weren't going to stop. Not sure if I would have got through or not, but you can just tell some people aren't going to stop at the light. I was rock climbing Apple Valley, California. I was in a rush and a bit teed off that I had to clean a route that someone had already agreed to do and then bailed at the last second. My belayer was preoccupied in a conversation and didn't check my knot. I jumped on the climb and got a really bad feeling right before I got to the first bolt. I decided to recheck everything and noticed my knot was half done. I stopped and double-checked everything else before continuing. That moment comes to mind before every sport climb. I also never had that friend belay me again. I once worked at a school where I had to look after the kids who stayed until their parents picked them up. Don't know what it's called in English, after-school care? They usually had the classic little game where they would hide and I pretended not to know where they were and told the parents that I hadn't seen them all day. Problem is that they would do this 2 or 3 at a time and then come out all together. Usually. One time this kid started hiding with some others at around 6 p.m. but didn't come out at all. So he kept hiding away until 7 p.m. at the end of my shift. Thank frick that during my closing routine I found him in some ridiculous tiny little space because I totally forgot about him. I had about 40 to 50 parents come in between 6 and 7. When his mother came to pick him up way later than I expected, I acted all jolly, but I seriously would have closed off since I thought all the children had left. Not a proud moment. I almost killed my niece's cat via washing machine. I was staying with my brother and his family for a bit when I first moved to the city. One day I threw a bunch of clothes in the machine, went back to my room to get a sweater, threw that into the machine on top of the curious feline that had jumped in while I was out of the room, poured in the detergent and just about closed the lid when I decided to double-check the pocket of my sweater. As soon as I moved it out jumped the cat. Never told anyone, but I made a point of checking from then on. Very recently, I changed a light bulb at work in a corridor that rarely got used. A long fluorescent bulb. As I was walking away, turning a corner, I realized the pitch of the hum of the light seemed off. Just seemed higher pitched than normal. I went back to check to make sure the light was on. It was on fire. Don't know if it was the bulb or the fixture, but the whole thing was in flames and the light was on. Dealt with it, but if I'd kept walking, the building would probably have taken serious damage before sprinklers kicked in. A colleague of mine saved me. I'd printed around 500 letters for him, and when I handed them over, he said the phone number didn't look right. I dialed it to check, and it was an adult phone line for lonely people. I'd put 2 numbers the wrong way around. We changed our number after that in case any customers misdialed. So glad that my colleague spotted it before those letters were sent out. I woke up late at night feeling thirsty. Everything was dark. I always keep a glass of water by the bed. I grope for the glass and grab it, and I'm about to take a swig when I suddenly think, no, better check. So I put it down and stumble groggily over to the light and switch it on, and there was a huge cockroach floating dead in the glass. And the gagging narrator award for an image so gross and sudden that you pause my recording process temporarily goes to you, sir or madam. Congratulations. Although admittedly, in this job the award gets handed out so frequently that it's worth slightly less than an Emmy, but more than a Tony. This was before backup cameras. I put the car in reverse with my foot on the brake and turned to look behind me. I just saw the ponytail of a little girl disappear behind my car as she bent over to pick up a toy. Away in the distance, her mum was running flat out, her face contorted in terror like I've never seen before. Not really a double check, but that's my story. Citations on an English paper. Every fricking time. One time I was putting my hair straightener away and I dropped it into the toilet. As soon as it hit the water, it started hissing and sizzling, and I assumed it was because it was still hot. For a second, I went to reach over and yank it out. Then I was like, wait, it's still plugged in. It never tripped the safety switch that bathroom outlets usually have because this house was old and didn't have bathroom outlets. I had to run a cheap extension cord from the office to the bathroom to do my hair. Literally almost grabbed a live electrical appliance that was shorting out in water. I'd copied a naughty adult link to send to my boyfriend, ended up not sending it by the way, and later was emailing my students to update them about something else. Accidentally pasted the link into the email and almost sent 20 college students a link to Pornhub. Short term, printing everything off for a London-Edinburgh trip last year and realised when double-checking our train tickets from London to Edinburgh, they were the wrong day. We still had one more day in London. Nothing could be done until we got to London, but if we hadn't noticed before getting to the train station on the day out, it would have been costly. Long term, this stretches the definition of double-checked, but it's still important. I tried to give blood a few times while I was in the Navy, but my iron was always too low no matter what I ate recently. Decided to check it out, got tests done, and I was anemic. Doctor asks if I want to just treat that or go further. Of course, go further and find out why I'm anemic. 18 months and a zillion tests later, Crohn's disease. Since caught while I was in the service, I got a medical retirement discharge, some cash, a monthly stipend, and full healthcare. If I'd just got the anemia treated, I would have gone out while sick deeper in and would probably be in a world of pain right now. I was driving a reach truck, working overnight at some depot. Another guy had crawled in to move a box. I don't know what the frick he was thinking, and I never double-checked because why the frick would I? Always did after that. If I hadn't, he'd be dead. I was pretty shaken and he was oblivious. It was such a seemingly minor thing to everyone except the guy driving the reach. I told him that if I'm driving the reach, he needs to stay the frick out of the aisle and his family can be glad that I lifted that load to look. I assume he just thought I was being a butthole, because he didn't seem to have any idea how close he came to dying. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was cleaning my room and throwing out a bunch of school papers, old envelopes, etc. I'm always nervous throwing out garbage bins in apartments. I guess the garbage chute seems more permanent than a bin that's collected weekly. Because there were so many papers and I was moving, I decided to double-check that bag. I had an envelope of over $1,300 in saving bonds and tips that I'd hidden in my drawer earlier in the year. I felt like I'd made $1,300 that day. I have a very similar story. My parents were moving out of their house, so I was cleaning all of my stuff that I still had stashed there. I found a box of papers from grad school. I graduated more than 20 years ago. I looked through it briefly, took out the graded copy of my master's thesis, and was going to throw the rest away. It was all just papers and notes from classes I'd taken, and I'd figured I'd never have any use for any of it. As I was taking the box to recycling, I just had a weird feeling that I should take the time to look through it all. So I started going through each folder.
Lo and behold, I found a folder that must have had about $500 in savings bonds that I'd brought to school, and I guess I must have forgotten about.
Veterinarian here. I asked for my assistant to bring me some glucose to inject into a 2-kilogram dog with hypoglycemia. He brings me this vial, and right as I was about to open it, I looked at it, and it was potassium chloride, KCl, which is used for euthanasia. Both were the same size and shape, but the one that would stop the dog's heart had a big black stamp on it, so it wasn't hard to differentiate them. As an extra, a professor of mine during a surgery asked for an antibiotic, which needs to be diluted before use, to inject after surgery was done. The intern brought the vial already diluted, but instead of putting injection water into the bottle, he'd actually put KCl. As the professor was injecting the antibiotic, she noticed the heart of the dog was stopping, but fortunately, the amount needed to kill the animal was a bit higher and they were able to save it. When they asked and saw what he'd actually put into the bottle, she went nuts on him for not double-checking it before diluting. I don't know what happened to the student. This is what I've always thought when I bring my cat into the vet for shots updates. I thought, that's ridiculous, they probably have the bottles for euthanasia marked and kept in a different spot. Thank you for terrifying me. Yes, thank you for enlightening all of us that we're one tired medical personnel away from a lethal injection at any given time. Fabulous. Ooh, I have one for this. I've lived in a few places over the years, but they all have one thing in common. Spiders, and lots of them. At an early age, I learned to always smack the heels of my shoes against the floor, my knee, etc. to knock out any spiders that might have crashed in my shoes overnight. One day, I was getting ready to leave the house and something interrupted that little ritual. Came back and couldn't remember if I'd checked and was about to slip them on when I decided to make sure, and sure enough, there was one that fell right out onto my knee. But it wasn't just any spider, no. It was a freaking black widow. After jumping up and possibly crapping myself in the process, I found it dancing across the floor and dealt with it. But good lord, the thought of what might have happened if I hadn't double-checked still makes my skin crawl to this day. Every time I'm driving and I'm turning into a different lane, I always check over my shoulder. I check all of my mirrors, then look over my shoulder. Do you know how many times it looks clear to merge into a different lane based off the mirrors, but when I finally look over my shoulder, I see someone right next to me? Especially bloody motorcyclists. A bit of background first. My university degree was split between two of the departments of my university, the Humanities Department and the Law and Social Sciences Department. I mostly worked with Humanities, with LSS handling about 30 to 40% of my degree. So at the start of my final year, I got my standard email from Humanities asking me to sign up for my history modules for the year. Oddly, there was no matching email from LSS for my politics modules, but I figured that I was probably only having politics modules in the second semester. Which was a stupid assumption, but also plausible. A couple of months into the semester, I get an email informing me that I won't have enough credits to graduate at the end of the year. What? So yeah, the university's student services had gone through some internal restructuring, and in the process, I'd become that one person who slips through the net. I had to rush and sign up for politics modules quickly. I was confirmed on them a couple of days later. I was chatting about it with a friend and thought, I should check to see when my first politics essay is due. It was 5 days away. I hadn't been to a single seminar or lecture. Well, crap. Happy ending. With 2 days to go, I managed to get in contact with my tutor, who got me a 2-week extension for extenuating circumstances after student services ignored my original application for an extension. It was my worst essay of my university career, but it was a pass, so screw it. This is more of a thank frick I had my husband double check, but anyways. Last week we went to bed downstairs a little late since our 3-year-old had colic. We lived in a half-finished apartment and heard a weird sound like the bulkhead door had been opened from the unfinished half of the basement. I, of course, thought someone had broke in or an animal had got in, so we locked ourselves in the room with our daughter and 4-year-old son and then called my brother-in-law who lives upstairs to check on it, since I didn't want to risk our children. He checks and clears it, but I just couldn't sleep after, which was a good thing since not even 10 minutes after he went upstairs, I heard a thump and sheet metal hitting the floor. At this point, I told my husband to quickly go out of the room, lock the door behind him and run up to get our dog, who is not people-friendly at all to those outside our family or close friends, to have him check the basement. When my husband went out, he looked over to see a panel had come off our furnace and it was billowing smoke and the fire alarms weren't going off. Thankfully, I knew where the emergency shutoff was. To keep this as short as possible, if I hadn't insisted my husband go out again, we might have been overcome by smoke inhalation in our sleep along with my sister and her whole family. In conclusion, furnace almost caught fire while the family was sleeping in a house with apparently faulty smoke alarm systems. Get your furnaces checked regularly and make sure you know where your emergency shutoff is, and test your fire alarms. Don't know if this counts, but I had a weird feeling something was off about my wife's behavior. Checked her phone, which I'd never done before and felt terrible about, and found out she cheated on me. It led to a cascade of discovery, as in she was in a relationship with this guy and getting pregnant from him and had had an abortion while visiting her family. Getting divorced now. Please don't take this as you shouldn't trust your partner, but be aware of changes in behavior. Winter here in Sweden. I took out the trash. The door was slightly ajar, but the dogs are really good with staying inside when they're supposed to. Came back inside, sat down, felt a bit uneasy and went to the door. I opened it and the Chihuahua was just there in the garden taking a wee. The dog probably wouldn't have survived for long in -13. How long does a body that tiny and with that many biological dead ends maintain its internal temperature for in temperatures like that? 5 seconds? Sorry, Chihuahua owners. I never shared this story before, so I can finally get this off my chest. When I was 16, I got a call from a friend who was alone at home, and he asked if I wanted to come over for pizza and a video game. And I thought, sure, why not? After a nice evening of food, games and movies, I noticed that he was a little bit off, and it wasn't like him. At one point I asked if he was okay, and we started to talk about girls, life, and problems of 16-year-old boys. Before leaving out, I asked if he wanted me to sleep over so he had some company for the weekend, and he just said, "No, I'll just order more pizza and keep playing at night, but thanks man." Well, I went out the door, and after walking around 10 meters from it, I noticed that I didn't close it properly. So I returned, and before closing, I remember thinking, I'm gonna give a check on him. Within 10 minutes of leaving his house and returning, that mother effer had tried to self-delete. I don't want to share more details about it, it's hard to write while all the memories are returning about this topic, but today, he is happy with 3 kids and a perfect marriage. We see each other once a year and we always cry after a big hug. I wasn't the one who double-checked, but I am so thankful that the person in question did. Story time. My high school decided to take the senior class to Six Flags at the end of our year. I'd recently gotten over my fear of roller coasters and decided to ride the Superman ride. Little did I know I'd buckled my seatbelt completely wrong. If it wasn't for the worker who checks everyone's seatbelt before the ride starts, I would have flown out of my seat like Superman and died. I know that moment usually feels like an inconvenience, like hurry up and start the ride, but it seriously saved my life. My first full-time job after college, I was a receptionist and office manager for an office. Within the first couple of weeks, I was told to put in an order for office supplies and was given a list of what to order. Since it was a huge office, there were large quantities of things, of course. While putting everything in, I had accidentally added a 0 at the end of one of the entries. Had I not double-checked, we would have had 1,000 boxes of reams of printer paper delivered instead of the 100 my boss requested. I don't like to think how that would have gone over, being so new at the job, let alone where we would have put that many big heavy boxes. In the German military, one base accidentally ordered 20,000 sunscreens instead of 20,000 bullets. My car is old enough that the lights don't turn themselves off. I have to do it manually. I've had my battery die many times because of this. On vacation in a different state, many hours away from anyone who could help me get my battery recharged, I very nearly walked away with the lights still on, but I turned around to check because I had a funny feeling. Delivery driver carrying acetylene on a flatbed truck. Co-worker had strapped down my load for me before I left for delivery, but I always check it myself just in case. I was able to pop the strap off with my bare hand because it had shifted and gotten some slack in it. Had I not checked, that 300+ pound bottle of flammable gas could have fallen off like a bomb on the freeway. What's your most awkward, "sorry, but I don't work here" experience? Made the mistake of wearing an orange t-shirt to Home Depot. I was approached 4 or 5 times walking back to the lumber section. The funny thing is the expression of confusion and denial on people's faces. I would say, "Oh, I don't work here, I just wore the wrong shirt today," and they would stare at me perplexed, wondering if I was messing with them. I was at a local thrift store, looking at old typewriters with my sister. They were very, very cheap, and she's a writer, so I was buying her one. There was a fellow there who heard me ask out loud a question about how it works. He was a nice old guy who came over and showed me the inner workings of the unit for a solid 50 to 60 minutes. He was very passionate about typewriters and had expert-level knowledge. After an hour of him showing me everything you could imagine with a typewriter and how they work, I asked a question about the price. He responds with, "Well, I don't know about that because I don't work here. I just like typewriters." He was probably lonely.
There's an older gentleman who used to be a professional photographer but had to retire due to being constrained to a wheelchair. He hangs around our camera displays a few hours every week and talks to people about cameras. He's so knowledgeable and so enthusiastic that no one's complained since he started doing it over a year ago. I was at a local computer and game store, and this elderly gentleman asked me where they put the controllers for PS3. I told him, sorry, I don't work here, so I don't really know. He said, seriously, why would you even work here if you don't know where anything is, dummy? 10 out of 10 would go to that store again. Imagine the asinine people the folks who do work here have to put up with then. Source, I work at a video game store. I was browsing movies at HMV when a lady came up to me and asked if I had Star Wars on Blu-ray. I was like, yeah, of course, they're my favorites. Then she asks where they are. At my house. That's when I realized she thought I worked there and wasn't just wanting to talk about Star Wars. I was in the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul, a very busy store. I asked the shop owner something and he just said, give me a plastic bag. Which I did, I understand Turkish. Then I helped him for a couple of minutes putting things in bags. I was just trying to help since he was really stressed out. He apologized so many times when he realized I wasn't one of his employees, and he gave me a discount. I mean, what was that guy's employee turnover that he didn't recognize whether someone in his shop was an employee or not? Or is this a one of those faces issue? In 2004, I worked at a Petco that was right next to a Best Buy, so the same blue shirt and khakis, only different logos. I went over to pick up a game right after work and got sucked into a chat with a guy about picking out a laptop. After 10 minutes of going through the pros and cons of various brands, he decides he'd like to get one. I was just like, cool, well, good luck with that. I used to work in a bar that was about a 5-minute walk from Tesco, a grocery store. Every Saturday afternoon, the bar would hit a lull between 4 and 5, so I'd get sent to Tesco to pick up fruit, mint, and juice for the night. And seemingly every Saturday, some customer in Tesco would come up to me and mistake me for staff there. My work uniform didn't even look similar to the Tesco uniform. I've never understood it. The best case of mistaking me for someone who worked in Tesco was this. A woman who came up to me while I had my hands full of cartons of juice. She started complaining about the crappy service and unhelpful staff. I tried telling her that I didn't work there, but she kept cutting me off. Eventually, she demanded to speak to my manager. I responded with, oh, you'll have to go to the bar around the corner to speak to the manager, that's where she is. The woman looked shocked for a second, but then said, oh, well, that explains why this place is run like a poor excuse for a circus. Your manager is off in a bar drinking on the job. I should have guessed it. To which I responded, no, I work in that bar, and I was sent here for stock. If you want to speak to my manager, you can go to my workplace and talk to her. She realized immediately the mistake she'd made and became much nicer and very apologetic to me. You know someone is a terrible person when you can see them transform so quickly from monster to angel. Then you just know that they abuse that ability and have the power to be a jerk to someone and convince everyone else that it's the other way round because they're always nice otherwise. When I was done working and had gotten back to my apartment, still in my mailman clothes, I was stopped by a woman asking me whether or not I had her package. I had to explain to her that I wasn't at work and that I'd been her neighbor the past 2 years. I was at dinner in a decent restaurant in LA. I was wearing a suit but had taken my jacket off and wasn't wearing a tie, so it was black shoes and pants and a white shirt. I went to the bathroom and was passing this table, and this guy grabbed my arm as I was walking past and said, sorry, could you find out where our wine is? We asked you ages ago. At this point, I hadn't realized I resembled the staff in this place and was a bit shell-shocked. So I said, sure, and went for a tinkle. On my way back, I thought I'd be a dutiful human being and go and tell the barman, as it was on my way, that this guy hadn't had his wine. The barman slapped his forehead and said, hang on, and gave me a glass of white to take to him, which I did and apologized for the delay, and the guy appreciated it too. Then I sat down and went on with my dinner. You probably broke a liquor law by doing that. You're nice, though. I was at Target right after work. I had on a red polo and khakis, and it had my company name embroidered on it that starts with a T. I was doing some network stuff, so I wasn't wearing my normal dress clothes. I forget what I was buying, but I had my cart full and my purse over my shoulder. A woman asked me where the laundry detergent was. I'm used to this, so I just told her that I think it's down a few aisles. The woman lost her ever-loving mind on me, saying that I was a horrible employee, I should know where everything is in my store, I'll never be paid above minimum wage because I'm so stupid. She wanted my name, my supervisor's name, and the number to corporate. It was after her rant that I politely informed her, Ma'am, I don't work here. I was just telling you where I saw it while shopping for my own stuff.
She didn't believe me and went to find a manager. I went to the checkout. I guess she found a manager and brought him to where I was checking out, started demanding that he reprimand me. He then informed her that I didn't in fact work there. She was flabbergasted and just walked away. No apology, no nothing. The manager, however, did apologize to me. I told him no problem, not his fault. You can't fix stupid. In conclusion, I no longer wear red polos to Target. Once I was at Walmart pretty late at night around 11. I think I was looking for cold medicine or something like that. Anyway, a woman who looks to be in her late 30s, I'm 20, comes up to me and shows me her child's school supply list, asking if I can help her find some portfolio folder or something. I was about to tell her that I didn't work there when I saw her daughter, who looked to be around 7 or 8, in one of the aisles peeking out and looking tired and a little nervous. I know how Walmart can be in terms of finding an employee to help you, so I decided to just stick around and helped them find everything on the list. I realized that neither of them spoke very much English, which made some of the items on the lists confusing. It took a good 20 minutes, but they were both really grateful and nice. I guess it's not really an awkward story like you asked for, but still a story. In conclusion, helped a non-English speaking woman and her daughter find school supplies at Walmart, even though I don't work there. Haha, well that sounds like something quite a few people I know would do out of sheer social anxiety rather than inherent niceness. Still pretty great of you though. A couple of weeks ago, I was at my local PetSmart chatting with the one guy there who actually knows his stuff. I have had a good deal of experience with aquariums, but I like to run my ideas by other people before I try them out. We were talking, but a customer came up, so he broke off to assist them. As I was standing there looking at the fish, an old woman walks up to me and asks about what kind of bowl and food she should get for her goldfish her grandson had brought home from the fair. I started to tell her that I didn't work there, but as I glanced around, the guy I was talking to and the other employee were busy. So it went kind of like this. I don't really… You know, the thing is, goldfish actually need a fairly large aquarium, so you should either get at least a 30-gallon setup with this filter and such, or if you don't want to invest that much, I'm sure the store would be more than happy to take it off your hands. If you'd like a more manageable fish, I'd recommend a better. Now, here are some good setups for them. Yada yada yada. I finish helping the old woman and immediately get another customer. At this point, I notice there's a mini rush as it's around 5-ish, and people are stopping by after work. This other customer comes up to me and asks a question about what fish would work well in her son's guppy tank. At this point, I'm pretty much committed and I decide to help her too. Eventually, after about 25 minutes and several more customers, the crowd thins out and I go back to my conversation with the employee. I ended up helping PetSmart sell several fish and one aquarium that day. In conclusion, PetSmart customer mistakes me for employee. I assist customers for half an hour because I'm too awkward to correct her. When I was a teenager, I worked in Virgin Records, renamed to Virgin Megastores in the UK now. I'd finished my shift and I'd had a pretty terrible day. I was browsing to buy a couple of CDs to cheer myself up. A customer walked up to me and started asking questions. I'd dealt with customers all day, so I breezily responded, "Sorry, I don't work here." So the customer responds, "But you're wearing a Virgin uniform." There was a super awkward pause during which I could have easily said I'm off duty and about to leave, and recovered, but in panic said, "I just like to wear it," and I walked out of the store. You know those moments when years later you recall an awkward encounter and just shudder? That's my scumbag brain's go-to moment. I had a similar experience while working at HMV many years ago. I'd just finished a shift in the run-up to Christmas, so I slapped a jumper over my HMV t-shirt and started walking toward the door, when a customer decided that it'd be okay to block my path and demand to know if I worked there. I said yes, but I was no longer on the clock and that I'd be more than happy to direct her to one of my colleagues, who she'd see were all wearing visible HMV shirts. She insisted that I help her anyway, and when I told her no, she flipped her lid and told me she'd be speaking with the manager and that I should be fired. I still can't get over the sense of entitlement some people have.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
Around Christmas time, I was on my lunch hour, in my uniform, picking up some Christmas stuff. I was in a card shop and this man in his 60s hit me over the head with a wrapping paper roll as a joke, before apologizing profusely on realizing I was a customer there. Having said that, I don't know why that would ever be considered a thing to do to someone who you don't know, whether they work there or not. I never resolved it. I was 16 and awkward. I was at the PX trying to pick out a rotisserie chicken for dinner when a guy came up to me and began asking where a couple of items were located in the store. Knowing that new people were always incoming, I told him what aisles some of the items were in, but then I said I was sorry for not knowing where one or two of them were located. He then got mad at me and said I should know the layout of where I work, and he was about to walk away angrily when I stopped him. I let him know that the people who work at the store wore a certain uniform, and as I wasn't wearing one, I obviously didn't work there. He still seemed mad and said, "Well, if you didn't look like a stock worker, you wouldn't have had to deal with me asking you questions." And then he walked off. My brother was at Best Buy and was mistaken for an employee because he was wearing a blue shirt. The first time someone asked him where something was, he politely told them he didn't work there, but he did tell them where the product was. The second time this happened, he thought he'd have some fun and pretty much had this guy following him all around the store looking for something my brother had no clue where it was. The guy eventually asked, "Do you even work here?" My brother simply replied, "Nope." The guy stormed out of the store so fast, my brother just went back to what he was doing. One time, my best friend and I were in Walmart digging in the $5 movie bin. We're standing looking at all these crappy movies, hoping to find a gem, when this random lady walks up and asks if we work there. I say, "Sorry ma'am, no we don't," and we continue digging through the bin. Well, this wasn't good enough for this lady. She stands there and asks us something about finding volleyball equipment. I forget exactly what it was she was looking for specifically. I asked if she looked through the sporting goods, which she was standing right in front of, and she says, "Well, yes of course, but I didn't see it. I thought y'all would know where it would be." At this point, my friend and I are both a little frustrated with the situation, so I tell her that we have no idea where else the volleyball equipment would be at the store. I ask if she's gone to Dick's Sporting Goods. That's when all heck broke loose. She raised her voice and started yelling about how she wasn't going to spend that much money and ranting and raving about the cost difference and this and that. My friend and I just looked at each other and walked away. In conclusion, lady wants to know where volleyball equipment is in Walmart and then yells at my friend and I, neither of us work there, for suggesting that she look at a dedicated sporting goods store. The dress code for the company I worked for was this black pullover and the standard dress shoes and trousers. I usually walk up to ASDA or Walmart for lunch and stood for about 5 minutes deciding which sweets or chocolate I should get. As I'm looking, I get a tap on the shoulder. There's a woman standing there and she begins shouting at me, "I have been standing here asking you for help for 5 minutes." I give a weird look and she realizes I don't work at ASDA and she gets embarrassed and walks away. As I'm walking to the till, I notice someone who actually worked at ASDA in kind of the same attire except for that they have an ASDA in big green letters on their jumper. Finally, a place to share my stories. When I was younger, around 14, I used to go shopping with my mother, as I'm sure lots of people do. She told me to wait outside the store while she quickly went in, and I, coincidentally, was wearing a similar outfit to the store clerks. Blue top, grey pants. An older woman walked towards me and practically yelled out that she had gone online and found a product she wanted and demanded that I take her to it. I politely said that I didn't work there and that was the end of it, right? Wrong. She claimed that I had to work there. I was wearing the uniform. I tried to argue otherwise, but she just insisted that I work there, and she'll tell my manager. Eventually, my mum returned and we both left, but I still fill with rage at the thought of this woman. "Ma'am, I don't work here." "Yes, you do." "Oh, okay." A reality-defying level of will to be a Karen on display here. Magnificent and inspiring, a feat of imagination we can all aspire to. Not awkward, but helpful. I noticed every helper in this store was ignoring this elderly lady. I happened to be wearing the same color of shirt and she came up to me for help. I happily helped her and even helped her go to the checkout lane. She tells me I'm a good employee and will write a nice letter to the company about me. A little backstory first. When I was about 11 years old, I went with my family to Philadelphia Zoo. It was about 80 degrees out and little me decided to wear a hoodie for some reason. Of course, I get too hot and need to take it off, but I forgot to wear a shirt underneath. So my parents brought me a shirt that said Philadelphia Zoo on it. So my family and I are walking around the gift shop right before we were about to leave. Little me is checking out some sweet stuffed animals when a middle-aged woman comes up to me and taps me on the shoulder. "Excuse me," she says, "where can I find sunscreen?" I was kind of confused when she asked me, but I was happy to help since she asked politely. I quickly looked around and saw some non-souvenirs behind the counter. I'm guessing you can find it at the counter over there," I said. Then this woman gave me a look like she wasn't sure if I was intelligent or not.
"So you're just guessing?"
she says. The way she said it made me realize something was off, but I didn't make the connection. Remember, I'm 11 fricking years old. Yeah, I mean, there are batteries and stuff back there, so there should be sunscreen. She then gave me a quick smile and said, "Okay, thank you for your help." I didn't have a clue what happened until I told my dad what was happening as we were leaving. He started laughing and pointed out I was wearing the Philadelphia Zoo shirt, and this broad thought I'd worked there. My first day of class, someone thought I was a professor. I was only 20 and I didn't think I looked that old.
"You've got to stop wearing the sweaters with the elbow pads, dude."
I was on my break and decided to walk down the mall to the Bon, which is now Macy's. I was wandering around, seeing what the sales were, when I was approached by one of those high and mighty rich witches. She asked where something was, and I told her I didn't work there. She got all huffy and stormed away. I went about my browsing. A few minutes later, here she comes again, this time with an actual store employee in tow saying, "That's her. That's the one that won't help me." The employee, actually a department manager, asked me why I was out of my department, and that I knew better than to not help a customer while approached. She then asked what department I was from. Finally, a chance to speak. I replied, "I sell shoes at," where I was promptly interrupted and given another tongue lashing, all while Rich Witch is sitting there with a smirk on her face. Manager told me to go to the office and wait for her. I turned on my heel and walked my way towards the exit doors instead. She catches up to me and loudly demands to know if I wanted to be fired or if I was going to go to the office. I responded, "I'm going to my office." She said there were no offices in that direction and demanded I turn in my name tag and gather my things. I took my name badge off, handed it to them while saying, "I don't think my district manager is going to like you firing this top-selling store manager from Kinney Shoes." She looked down at the name badge and back up at me, white as a sheet. Manager hands my badge back, mumbled an apology, and scurried away with her embarrassment and this rich witch. There's a lesson in this. Take your name badge off when you're on a break and go to other stores. While at my aunt's funeral, I was wearing my black suit. Hair was looking presentable, but my shoes were two different sizes and brands. Apparently, I looked like I worked at that funeral home. Probably because I was standing off to the side because I only knew 3 out of the 50 people there, including my aunt. Anyway, I was asked at least twice if I worked there or where this thing was by who else, family members I'd never met. They thought it was funny after I told them. I still don't know who they are. I was in Normandy, France at one of the landing beaches and some American tourists thought I was a tour guide. Me, being the kind of person I am, went along with it and started teaching them about the beach's history and telling them good places to visit. I'd only been there for an hour, but I did know the history rather well. I continued talking to them through the landing and taking questions, and then the tour guide turned up. I just laughed and walked away, and they thanked me in a confused manner. I don't think it dawned on them at that precise moment I was a random guy and not a tour guide. This has happened to me more than once. When I was a paramedic, I'd just finished my shift and popped into the grocery store to grab something quick for dinner breakfast. Apparently, an older woman's eyesight was off that day because she thought I worked there. Grocery store employees don't dress at all like a paramedic, but whatever. I helped her load a few frozen chickens into her cart. She thanked me profusely and wanted to get my name so she could tell my manager what a great employee I am. So I gave her the name and number of my supervisor. The next Monday, my supervisor calls me into his office and asked me to explain this voicemail. "Hello, my name is Old Woman. I just wanted to say that you have one of the finest employees in the entire grocery store. He helped me load all the chickens I needed for my potluck into my cart immediately and without hesitation. He was so kind and generous with his time and blah blah blah." His voicemail actually cut her off. The message was so long, so she called back and left a second voicemail just to finish her praise. My supervisor just stared at me. I stared back. We never spoke of it again. I think he was of the opinion that I was moonlighting as some sort of grocery store chicken-loading demigod. What companies have lost your business forever? Bank of America. Loyal customer for 10 years. Insulted time and time again. First with their bullcrap service fee for monthly auto-pay transactions, then I had to get a replacement debit card, which took way too long. I called to check on it, and a woman on the line said they'd never sent one out. So, very annoyed, I got another one. This card finally came, and I went to ATM to activate it, and it didn't work. Called back, and apparently this was the first card I'd ordered, which was now rendered useless because the second card, which was still in the mail, was now associated with my account. Got very irate but remained polite with the woman on the line and was basically told there was nothing they could do. Still stuck with them. Fast forward to a different state a few months later. I got a call and I was told my account had been compromised. Was given some vague explanation about mass data theft, but basically told they had to deactivate my card and send me a new one. I told them how inconvenient this was, and they suggest I go to a branch to get a new card. I do this, and they say since my account was opened in a different state, they can't give me a temp card, and that I have to wait 5 to 7 business days again. Woman at the branch is nice and enters my new address, then calls the branch in Texas to get them to send me a new card. 5 to 7 days, no card. Call and find out that the card was sent to my old address in Texas because my address hasn't been updated, which is total bullcrap. I lose it. I don't scream, but I do ask her several pointed questions including, when is this company going to get its crap together? Which resulted in the rep acting as though I was the worst person in the world for swearing whilst frustrated and threatening to hang up. I apologize for swearing and then ask what they can do. Again, I'm basically told, tough crap, and that she can send me a new card and I can wait without one for another 5 to 7 days. I pause, think about it for 3 solid seconds and say, close my account, I'm done with your company. Short story? F Bank of America. HP. When my laptop was having overheating problems, the woman on the customer service line fricking lied and said my warranty had expired, even though I had multiple pieces of evidence showing that I had about a month left on my warranty. They were going to charge me $250 to fix the problem. I had to spend hours on the phone with various customer service associates just to get them to resolve the warranty issue. Luckily, I ended up fixing the overheating without shipping out my laptop, but still, F HP. I really like my laptop, but I'm never buying anything from them again after the bullcrap treatment I got. Currently on my HP, it can fry an egg because it gets so overheated. Also, it sounds like a vacuum cleaner built for a squirrel because of the fan. This story is 11 years old and we don't know if HP have got better, but I can testify that my first PC from them was met with a similar level of customer service, namely telling me to try the same update that had disabled my PC's audio every prior time I'd installed it to fix my freezing problem. PayPal, because they almost managed to mess up my overseas vacation. Long story short, at the time, still, they flagged and locked your account if you tried using their service in a different country than the one your verified address is located in. Fine. Banks sometimes do that too if you don't warn them you're traveling in advance. Where PayPal failed is in their unblocking process. You needed to input a secret code sent to either your verified phone or your verified address, both of which were inaccessible to me because I was halfway around the fricking world. Priceline.com, because 45 minutes away from the airport is not an airport area hotel. I avoid PayPal whenever possible, but it's hard to when a lot of online stores don't take anything else. A guy bought my PS2 and kept telling me to tell him when the PS2 was on its way. I sent the PS2 and updated the buyer. He immediately filed an unauthorized PayPal transaction dispute, which basically means he claimed that someone used his PayPal account without his permission, so he wanted his money returned. I explained what happened. I had the email conversation with the scammer saved and I had a postage receipt, but PayPal wouldn't have any of it. Fortunately, I never post anything until the money is in my bank account, so I didn't lose anything. My PayPal account remained locked, and they wanted me to repay them for refunding the scammer. Yeah, right. Now I just use my girlfriend's account when they're the only payment option. GameStop. They just cannot compete with Steam or GOG.com for PC games. GameStop sucks, but for console games and hardware, you can get it all early if the manager knows how to work the company and will for you. Free 7 days on used games. I beat the game in 7 days and then return it, though I suppose it isn't giving them great business. Best Buy. When an object on sale rung up at the wrong price, I asked them to change it to what the shelf said. The cashier said she couldn't, so I asked her to call the manager to change it then. The manager came over and said, "That's the price." I said, "Well, let's walk over to the shelf and I'll show you the posted price." He said, "No, and we don't want your business." So I got mad and asked for the senior manager, at which point he told the cashier to call the police. I was like, "I've done nothing wrong, call them." They came and were like, "Yeah, he's a complete butthole, but he did ask you to leave, and if you don't, you're trespassing." So I asked the cop for his contact info and then contacted Best Buy Corporate and explained it, provided the manager's name and cop's name, and they sent me a $200 gift card as an apology. But I was done with Best Buy. I gave it to a family member for Christmas, since this happened a couple of weeks before Christmas a few years ago. They were very pleased. Burger King. Almost every time I've gotten food poisoning in my life, it's been from BK. I've had crap service many times as well. But the final straw was that I wanted the spicy chicken sandwich thing with extra sauce on it. The last couple of times, there was barely any of the spicy orange sauce on it. I opened the box it was in, and the fricking thing was swimming with the sauce. Not just extra sauce, but the sandwich was a soggy mess of chicken, bun, and sauce. It was completely inedible. I complained to the manager and he said, "Well, you wanted extra sauce." F you. Sony. Not because of stupid hacking, because they used to be a great engineering company, and then sold out and got into music and movie creation. They started to hobble their devices. Then, they put rootkits on their CDs. They became complete scum. AT&T. I was told I could have UVerse high-speed internet in my apartment. They ship me a router. I leave everything in the box and wait for the installer to get there because I have a funny feeling, which turned out to be correct. The installer shows up, informs me the lines haven't been updated and I can't get UVerse. Disappointed, I take the prepaid UPS sticker out of the box they shipped me, slap it on the box, tape it back up, and ship it back. A month later, I get a bill in the mail for the router. I call and spend a lot of time confirming they indeed got the router and was assured the billing system just hadn't been caught up yet. So I thought it was over. Nope. Months later, I start getting calls from a collection company. AT&T sold my debt to them. I spend more time, oodles of time, telling them that they have the damn router and to call off their hired goons. Ended up sending the goons a certified letter to cease and desist. Everything was quiet. I thought it was over. Nope. A few months later, I start getting calls and letters from another collection agency. Collection agency number 1 sold it to a different collection agency. This time I pitch a fit. I call AT&T. I tweet AT&T reps on Twitter. I raise a heck of a stink, and finally, the calls stop. I think it's over. Nope! I start getting collection letters for $14. Apparently, they took off the $89 to $100 for the router they'd been wanting to charge me, but still wanted me to pay the fee the collection agency tacks on to make the debt worth their while. So I call AT&T and they have the fricking nerve to say they'll have to investigate and see if I owe the fee or not. God. Needless to say, I spent many hours on this over the year and I'll never get that back. AT&T, go F yourselves, forever, in the dark with a chainsaw. There was a pizza place near my campus. The middle-aged owner was always there hitting on drunken girls late at night. While that didn't bother me, what did was that any time I tried to order, he brushed me off, like I was distracting him from his flirting. Very rude and arrogant. His employee was incredibly nice and served me. But the fact that it happened more than once, and the fact that there are 3 more pizza places on the same block, well, screw that guy. I mean, I'm more annoyed at the implication of a sober, dirty old man hitting on inebriated girls, but hey, you get teed off by what tees you off, my dude. Canadian here. Rogers, based on many bad experiences and principle. Bell, on principle alone. Quiznos. So, had a coupon for a free sub. I ordered it, and they wouldn't validate the damn thing. Apparently Kellogg's or whatever cereal I got the coupon from did it without their permission. Which I find really hard to believe. Anyway, I was starving and they'd made me the sandwich, and I felt guilty, so I paid for the darn thing, even though I was broke and it was like $10 fricking. It was burnt, just a mess of bread and sauce and crap all over, and just straight up fricking disgusting. I don't know how anyone can stand them, I was so mad. Went back just to meet my sister a few days later though, and she had ordered a drink already. Free refills. So we just hung out there, shared the drink and refilled it like 20 times. Vengeance. Not really, I'll never go back. Air France. What a shower of rude and incompetent, snobby jerks in general. I was stuck in Paris 2 years ago at Christmas because of snow. They had nobody working the desks anywhere. They booked me into a hotel room that didn't exist, so I left the warm departure lounge for the freezing entrance. A member of staff told me to F off when I asked when the customer service desk would open, and they literally had one check-in desk open to deal with all the rearranged flights in their own fricking airport. They then lost my luggage for the whole 3 weeks I was home and refused any compensation claim. Oh yeah, and the morons will speak French to you on a Paris to Tokyo flight and be angry when you need to switch to English. So I started replying in Japanese, ya funny boys. Ulta. Too many snobs. God, me too. I found a great price on an epilator at Ulta online. Went to the store and found it was $25 more expensive. Asked the sales girl about it and she stood there seriously for about 5 minutes, scratching her head and being all, "Oh my god, that's so weird, I can't believe, like, it's a different price. How weird is that? Like, it's so random, oh my god." I had to actually walk away and find someone who looked less stupid, but couldn't find anyone, so left and I bought the epilator at Target instead. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Not exactly relevant anymore since they closed down years ago, but before that point, Circuit City. I've had 2 horrible experiences with them, and after the second time, I swore to never go back there again. Shortly after the GameCube came out, I was searching all around town for one. I called them up and they said they had a whole bunch in stock. We drove over there, about a 10-minute drive, and not only did they not have any, they hadn't had any for days and wouldn't be getting any for several more days. The day Xenosaga Episode 3 came out, I walked around town to try and find a copy. Circuit City said they had a few copies, and they'd save one for me. We took that same 10-minute drive out there, and I find the guy I spoke with and he opens a drawer and pulls out Xenosaga Episode 2. I tell him, no, I wanted Episode 3. His reply, this is 3. No, it's not. Yeah, it is. That's 2. Whatever, man, it's the same thing anyway, right? So are you gonna buy it? No, I'm looking for 3. I have 2. But this is the same thing? You're an idiot. And so I left, never to return. Dell. 4 years ago, I had some expensive Dell XPS laptop that started getting randomly hot, so I called Dell's customer support. They tell me nothing is wrong, then hang up on me. A few weeks later, my laptop won't turn on. I call customer support again, but this time they send someone out to look at the laptop. The motherboard was cracked, so they just replace it, but the laptop was still getting really hot. 14-year-old me thinks that the fans are broken, shocker, right? But they insist that nothing is wrong. Long story short, they end up replacing my motherboard, RAM, and hard drive over the next few visits, but they still insist the laptop just gets hot. At this point, it's not the same laptop, so I keep asking Dell for a new one, since this one just doesn't work. They won't replace it, but my mum finds out where I live. Dell has been sued and lost multiple times for using faulty parts and so on. We bring that up, and a few weeks later there's a $4,500 Alienware laptop sitting at my door that they sent me for free. My friend still wonders why I tell him to never buy from Dell and just offer to help them build their own PCs instead. Walmart. I don't hate capitalism or large corporations, but Walmart represents everything that is wrong with American capitalism and corporate culture. Yeah, this would be my answer too. There are so many things wrong with it that I can't even point out which is most important. They treat their workers horribly, their customers horribly, they do illegal crap overseas and use sweatshops to make their prices so low. They put smaller companies out of business and ruin livelihoods in the process. And they mess up the economy so that it has to rely on all these horrible facets. They're terrible on every level. I can't boycott every company that does anything wrong, but holy crap, if you're gonna pick one to boycott, it should be this one. It doesn't cover the same issues, just the symptoms, but feel free to enjoy our old video, Store Workers and Customers, What's Your People of Walmart Story, on this channel to hear what this mega corporation turns people into. Capital One. They kept losing my payments, my online payments, so I'm not sure how you can lose those. 100 times this. Years ago, I had a credit card with them. It had a balance of around $600. I called to let them know I was canceling it. I planned to pay it off over a few months at $150 a month. At the time, I was reasonably well off, so I paid most of my bills on autopilot. After 9 months, I realized I was still paying it off, and that didn't make sense. I checked my balance. With no new charges and paying $150 a month, my balance was now over $1,000. I called them and went through all kinds of people before I found out what was happening. They had literally made up charges on my account. I knew the charges were fake because I'd already cancelled the card. These fake charges were putting me repeatedly over my limit, with a $40 over-limit charge each time this happened. Once I realized this and threatened legal action, they realized it was a computer error, and that your account is fine. They apologized for the mistake and I thought I was done with it. 10 years later, I started getting calls trying to collect on a $1,500 balance. Whenever I get such a call, I simply tell them, that account was paid in full and on time and you have been defrauded. I generally don't hear anything for about a year at a time now. Target Photo Center. They had an ad that when you sign up, you got 50 free prints. So I made an account and ordered 50 pictures for my 21-year-old cousin's funeral picture board. I show up and the trashy lady tried to charge me for all the prints. When I ask to see a manager, she just laughs and walks away. And it wasn't the first time I had a bad experience there. Apple. I work in IT, so I will never understand paying more money for less functionality, less hardware flexibility, and proprietary connectors. Nexon. As for gaming, worst company I have ever bought virtual points for. I spent about $600 in 2 years for that game, and their customer service was pretty much non-existent. You'd send a complaint, a ticket, and you'd get an immediate response, "We're busy, we may not get to your ticket for a while." And 6 months later you'd get a response, but nothing would be accomplished. So you'd send another complaint and it's just a horrible experience. 0 out of 10 would never buy from again. Nikon. I got one of their PowerShot cameras and I had it for about 8 months. I didn't get it wet, I didn't drop it. Basically, I kept it in ideal condition, but the LCD screen still broke. So I sent it to them just to have it fixed. Keep in mind it was still under warranty, so repairs should have been free. A few weeks later, they sent me an email that basically said, "Yeah, we'll fix it." For $100? Hell no! That was almost half the price of the camera. Switched back to Canon and haven't looked back. After watching Food Inc., I haven't bought one Tyson product. It's been nearly 2 years and I've continued to buy free range and as much organic stuff as I can. Coming from someone who makes minimum wage, it's hard to afford, but I refuse to support crap companies like Tyson. Their plant, anti-union bias, active recruiting in poverty-stricken countries, and pollution have ruined my hometown. You can smell my town 15 miles away. What makes me more mad, though, is how my hometown bent over backward to accommodate them. Lexington, Nebraska is run by the "money? Yes" idea of government, and it leads to a smelly, broke, corrupt as crap rural Nebraskan town. Lenovo. Like a month ago, I ordered a laptop with them. Due to finding a better deal online, I decided to purchase a different laptop. Before I spent the money, I cancelled the order with Lenovo. Unlike something like Amazon where you can cancel it online, I had to call and I had to talk with someone who I could barely understand. Thick foreign accent. 45 minutes later, I thought I'd cancelled the order. The man told me it would take 3 to 5 days and they'd send me an email. 7 days later, I got the email. Another 4 days after that, and I was charged the $800 for the laptop, despite only having $500 in my account, overdrafting 3 pending purchases. Another 2 hours on the phone with my bank and Lenovo, and I was promised a full refund within 24 to 48 hours. Those passed and nothing happened. I called again and they said the order had already shipped. It shipped weeks after I cancelled the order? So I had to wait until it arrived and refuse the order. Today, a week or so after that, and I've still got nothing in my account, despite them continually saying like within 3 business days and in 24 hours. I still don't have any money, but Wells Fargo is on my side at least. In summary, screw Lenovo. They charged me for an order since it shipped over a week after I cancelled it, and have taken 3 weeks and still haven't given me back the money I desperately need and have incurred about $100 of fees due to overdrafts on. Well, since I've already complained about HP, I'll say that in my one instance of complaint to Lenovo, they were a lot better about it and refunded. But then again, their crappy laptop had electrocuted me, so maybe they got off easy for that. VMware. I purchased an academic license of Workstation 9 from them, and I needed another for my other computer. It's only a per-computer license. Nowhere on the academic site did it say you could only buy one academic copy. Their website errored out on purchase, telling me that my email address was already registered when I tried to buy the second license for Workstation while already logged in. I contacted support, and after a month of runaround and my pointing out that I had an academic project coming due that required the second license, they told me that I could only get one academic license for Workstation, which was stated nowhere on their site. I then requested my support ticket to be escalated due to them giving me the runaround, and they suggested using an alternate email to purchase the software. You need an EDU email to get the academic version, and it's kind of hard to get a second EDU email. I'm not dealing with their bullcrap anymore, not after that one. If they wanted to say you can only buy one copy of Workstation on academic license within even the first week of the ticket, that's one thing, but to mess me around for a month while I have academic work coming due that requires the second license and then give me the bird after a month of messing me around, screw them. Business in Australia called Harvey Norman's.
I'll never shop there because the guy who runs it, Jerry Harvey, is a huge whiner who always wants the government to tax this or ban that because his business is hard to run in the current economic conditions. It's called capitalism, mate. Just because you had some boom times doesn't mean it'll last forever. Adapt or die.
Sears. While working there for a year and a half, I came to the conclusion that they don't care about their customers or their employees. Those are great examples of how they like to mess over everyone. I hated working there, and I can't believe the one I worked at is still open. We'd have 5 customers all night, and then managers would yell at us for not getting 5 people to join the rewards program or get a credit card. They told us to lie about the rewards program and to sign people up without them knowing. They wanted us to ask for their phone numbers and emails and sign them up without telling them why. It was so stressful. A woman had been working there for 25-ish years and was only making 9-something an hour. I was sick of going home and crying every night, and I was sick of being threatened with losing my job. Before I quit, my manager informed me that the store manager did not want me there. I worked hard and I was great with customers, but I wouldn't lie or sweet-talk people into something they really didn't want, so they drove me to quit. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.